I can do this, and I will do this. This is what I tell myself each day. I know your choice matters. Because of racial segregation, I wasn't even allowed to use the front door of the bank in Greenville, Mississippi. I remember the back door, but I refused to let that slight cause me to fail. Without the ideal family setting and making a living in the cotton fields of the Delta, I shifted my thinking, and so can you. I imagined possibilities that did not even exist at the moment, but they eventually became my reality. I became a Pulitzer-nominated author, an entrepreneur who helped to introduce Stairmaster exercise system to the world. Now the president and CEO of 2 small businesses and one of the owners of a bank that 50 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to even walk through the front door. The American dream is not dead. Let me say it again. The American dream is not dead. Maybe a jump start is all it needs. So was my success a choice? You better believe it was definitely my choice. You see, adversity, for many of us, is a catalyst that initiates the change. It isn't easy. It's not always fun, but it's a choice. You can do this. No matter what situation you find yourself in, you can maximize your potential. You will meet adversity. Trust me, it will strengthen you. You will fail. It will be lessons learned you will never forget. You will be challenged, but your creativity will amaze you. Get-rich-quick schemes don't work, no matter how enticing. But if you're willing to shift your thinking and make the choice to work hard, believe in yourself, and continually educate yourself, you can accomplish whatever it is that you have imagined. Just imagine the possibilities and be ready to work them into reality. You know, we're excited to help you jumpstart your own success story. Now roll up your sleeves. You can do this. Be your own dream come true. Welcome to Thrive.
Yes, 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 and yes. Andrew Bloomer on today's show. We're going to talk about how to rapidly grow your revenue on page 38 of this new book I've just written here. The new book, if you want to download the book, you go to thrivetimeshow.com/millionaire, thrivetimeshow.com/millionaire to download the book. And the new book is called...
Drum roll, please.
Millionaire's Guide, How to Become Sustainably Rich, a step-by-step guide to becoming a successful money-generating and time-freedom-creating business. Bloomer, why would anybody out there want to create a step-by-step, why would anybody out there want to implement a step-by-step system to build a money-generating and time-freedom-creating business?
Yeah, so that way they can get to their goals. All of, the businesses exist to serve you, and it's a vehicle to get from point A to point B. And so they would, most people would love a system to do that.
So again, a lot of people will ask me all the time, they'll say, how did you build a successful company? I'm teaching you specifically how to do it. And if you go to thrivetimeshow.com/millionaire, you can download a Millionaire's Guide, How to Become Sustainably Rich, a step-by-step guide to building a successful money-generating and time-freedom-creating business. If you look here on page 38, you'll notice this great couple, Ryan and Rachel Wimpy. When we first started working with them, and their business was at a certain revenue size, and now look at it, they have 17 locations. So the question is, what are they doing that's allowing them to have massive growth?
I'm Rachel with Tip Top Canine, and we just want to give a huge thank you to Clay and Vanessa Clark.
Hey guys, I'm Ryan with Tip Top Canine. Just want to say a big thank you to Thrive 15. Thank you to Make Your Life Epic. We love you guys, we appreciate you, and really just appreciate how far you've taken us. This is our old house, right? This is where we used to live a few years ago. This is our old neighborhood. As you can see, it's nice, right? So this is my old van and our old school marketing, and this is our old team. And by team, I mean it's me and another guy.
This is our new house with our new neighborhood. This is our new van with our new marketing. And this is our new team. We went from 4 to 14, and I took this beautiful photo. We worked with several different business coaches in the past, and they were all about helping Ryan sell better and just teaching sales, which is awesome, but Ryan is a really great salesman. So we didn't need that. We needed somebody to help us get everything that was in his head out into systems, into manuals and scripts, and actually build a team. So now that we have systems in place, we've gone from 1 to 10 locations in only a year.
In October 2016, we grossed 13 grand for the whole month. Right now it's 2018, the month of October. It's only the 22nd. We've already grossed a little over 50 grand for the whole month, and we still have time to go. We're just thankful for you, thankful for Thrive and your mentorship, and we're really thankful that you guys have helped us to grow a business that we run now instead of the business running us. Just thank you times 1,000.
So we really just want to thank you, Clay, and thank you, Vanessa, for everything you've done, everything you've helped us with. We love you guys.
And I think a lot of people think that success is somehow like a spiritual thing. It's a thing that can't possibly be done. It's a thing that it's kind of mystical, kind of woo-woo. But we're going to walk you through the specific steps you need to take. And I'm going to read this notable quotable to you from Dave Ramsey, the best-selling author. He writes, "You must walk to the beat of a different drummer, the same beat that the wealthy hear. If the beat sounds normal, evacuate the dance floor immediately. The goal is not to be normal because, as my radio listeners know, normal is broke." So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and make out the schedule today for what you'll need to do if you want to become sustainably successful. And I'll be taking notes here on the screen so people can kind of follow along. So the first thing you'll want to do if you want to become sustainably rich is you're going to need to start every day with a to-do list. Now, Bloomer, why does everybody who's sustainably rich, all of your clients that have ever achieved massive success, why do they all, without fail, create a daily to-do list?
Yeah, so if you don't have a daily to-do list, then you're basically running around all day long, with no goal, no map, no direction, and you're being reactive as opposed to being proactive. So making that daily to-do list kind of determines what's going to happen during your day, throughout your day.
Awesome. And then item number 2 is you want to create a calendar. You want to create a calendar. Now I'm going to show you guys my calendar today. I'm going to show you some to-do list items today. I'm going to walk you through the details today, but you've got to have a to-do list and a calendar. Now the calendar, we'll pull up the calendar here. This calendar here is my calendar for today. And you can see we're kind of action-packed today. I mean, we have our first client interaction at 6 a.m. and we go nonstop throughout the day today. Everything in red is a show that I'm recording today. All the green, those are actual meetings with actual clients. And then purple, those are clients that want to schedule a 13-point assessment where they want to schedule a time to meet for me to sit down with them and to make a plan to help them grow their company. And again, that's a free service we offer. We offer a free 13-point assessment for anybody that wants one. Bloomer, if I didn't block out time in my schedule, and I didn't tell the team behind me, if I didn't say, hey, guys, this is my schedule, and these little purple areas in the schedule, those are the availabilities for me to do 13-point assessments. What would happen?
You'd be double booked all day long. All day long, you'd have a 13-point assessment on top of a show, and nothing would actually get done.
Yeah, or you'd have a situation where you'd have no 13-point assessments booked or no shows booked. Or so you have to create a to-do list. You have to create a calendar. And these are the things you have to do if you want to become sustainably rich. Now, again, Dave Ramsey said, I'm pulling this up here, folks. And again, you can follow along by going to thrivetimeshow.com/millionaire. You can download the book. Dave Ramsey writes, you must walk to the beat of a different drummer, the same beat that the wealthy hear. If the beat sounds normal, evacuate the dance floor immediately. The goal is not to be normal because, as my radio listeners know, normal is broke. What percentage of people, I'm not, again, there's a book called The Millionaire Next Door. There's a book called The Millionaire Next Door that can give you the actual statistics. But just for the people that you've met, what percentage of people do you know, Bloomer, that actually have a to-do list or a calendar just by default?
The only people that I've met that do it either are very successful at business already, or they are some of the people that we've interviewed on the show who have achieved massive success.
Okay. Now that's the third step you want to do. Okay. Is you want to surround yourself. Okay. Surround yourself with successful people in person or virtually only. Okay. Now this is big. This is big because If you read my new book, you'll hear my story of how I did it. But what happens is if you're around people that are perpetually wrong all the time, and that's who you listen to, what's going to happen?
Well, you will become like them. So you will also be perpetually wrong. And, you are the average of the people you spend the most time with. And so if you're spending the most time with people who are wrong, then you will also be wrong.
So let's go back here to the book here. So again, this is in the new book. And Steve Jobs, I put this on page number 40 of the book here. I wrote, you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can connect them looking backward. So you have to trust the dots will somehow connect in your future. You have to trust in something, your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever, says Steve Jobs, the co-founder of Apple, the founder of Next, and the former CEO of Pixar. I have found that when I was building my first company, again, I started using a to-do list, and nobody I knew was making a to-do list at age 15. I didn't know people at age 15 making a to-do list. A calendar. I didn't know people using a calendar. Surrounding myself with successful people. I really didn't know any successful people. So how does one start? So I'm going to walk you through some moves you can do. One, I would recommend that you read Think and Grow Rich. Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Now, Bloomer, why would it be a wise idea for everybody out there to read Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, one of the best read, top read self-help books of all time, one of the most often quoted self-help books of all time? Why would it be a good idea for people to listen to Napoleon Hill's book, Think and Grow Rich, as opposed to listening to pop music on the radio?
Oh, man. Well, Napoleon Hill interviewed many, or pretty much all of the successful people in his day and age, like all of the most successful people that were alive, he was interviewing. And he took all of that knowledge and put it in this book, and it explains how to think and grow rich. And so it teaches you how to have a burning desire to go after what you want. It teaches you how to have success, but it also technically puts you around all of these people who are also successful, even though you're not physically with them.
There it is. The second book you want to read a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. You want to read Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. Now, what I'm going to do on part 2 of today's show is I'm going to interview Robert Kiyosaki on part 2 of today's show. So on part 2 of today's show, you can hear an actual interview with Robert Kiyosaki, the author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And I hope that you are out there listening and that interview blesses you. Robert Kiyosaki right now is currently talking about the inflation and the collapse of the U.S. dollar. And it turns out it's going to be very hard to have a successful company if the dollar collapses. And so we'll talk to him about that. But I think it's very important for everybody out there to know he wrote a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which is an incredible book that talks to you about the process of becoming rich and the steps to doing so. Okay, and I'll just give you a little meat on the bones here. One, he talks about everyone starts off at the employee phase. Everybody out there starts off as an employee. The next step, people become self-employed. The next step, okay, is people become an employer. And the next step is they become an investor. And those are what he calls that the cash flow quadrant. And for me, when I read that book, I was working at Applebee's, Target, and DirecTV. So my normal consisted of I would go to work at DirecTV, and Applebee's and Target. And usually my first job I had was at Target. And when I would work at Target or in Applebee's and DirecTV, I tried to get the schedule that would allow me to work the most number of hours. Now, Andrew, if you wanted to work 100 hours a week, in my case, why did I have to have 3 jobs?
Well, you wanted 3 jobs so you could afford to grow your business at the time.
Yeah, so I was trying to build this company called DJconnection.com, which, again, full disclosure, I haven't owned that company for well over a decade. But I needed to buy speakers.
Yep.
I needed to buy lights.
They're expensive.
I needed to buy DJ equipment.
That's right.
I lived on guitarcenter.com. That was where I lived. And I would go to the store and I would walk in that store on Sundays. I'd go walk in there and I go, okay, how much are the JBL speakers? The JBL, because I need 2 of them at least to get started.
Yeah.
Now, this is before they had self-powered speakers. So back in the day, you had to have an amplifier and you had to have a speaker, but they were separate. And the speakers were like, I don't know. I don't want to exaggerate the number, but like $700 to $1,000 a piece.
Yeah.
Each speaker, plus I needed the amplifier. An amplifier for the speakers was about $1,000. So I needed to buy, in terms of equipment, I needed to buy at least 2 speakers and the amp. That's $3,000. Now I'm working at a job back in the day where I'm making $7 an hour. All right. So $7.25. That's before taxes, by the way. So I knew I needed to work 413 hours if I wasn't paying taxes, and I was. But I also got tipped at Applebee's, so I made more when I got tipped. I needed to work 413 hours in order to buy my speakers and my amplifier.
Yeah.
So what I would do is I would listen to Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Think and Grow Rich while I was Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki and Think and Grow Rich while I was driving on my way to
work.
Yes.
All the jobs. Yep.
Right. And I'm listening and I'm going, all I need to do, baby, is work. And I actually wrote this stuff down in my journal. I'm like, all I need to do is work 413 hours. Yeah. I got it. Here we go.
6 weeks.
Here we go.
6 weeks. We can buy 2 speakers and an amp.
There it is. Yeah.
6 weeks.
All right. So I was listening in my mind all the time to Think and Grow Rich.
Yeah.
I was listening to Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Now, Napoleon Hill says, this is powerful. He says, a goal is a dream with a deadline. That's what Napoleon Hill says. A goal is a dream with a deadline. I'm going, okay, I got this. All I got to do is work a total of 413 hours en route. And by the way, I was driving a 1989 Ford Escort at the time, but I was like, all I need to do is work 413 hours, and then I can buy my speakers. So I made a goal. I wrote down my goal. I wrote it down. Everyone needs to write down your goals on your to-do list. Okay. So on your to-do list, giving you a little meat on the bones, write down your goals on your to-do list. So I wrote down, and this is a real thing. I wrote it down. I had about $20,000 of initial equipment I needed to buy. Okay. And a lot of people have stories where they say their mom helped them or their cousin helped them. I didn't have anybody that could write me a check or help me buy the gear. So I did it, but I had to buy $20,000 of initial equipment. That was my example. That was my life. I had to do that. I'm asking you, if you're out there listening right now, what do you need to do? What do you want to do? For me, I needed $20,000 of gear, and Bloomer, I knew I needed it. And I knew that I was making about $7.25 an hour because at Applebee's, I got tipped. At Target, I made $7.25 before taxes ish. So I needed to work 2,758 hours.
That's a lot of hours.
Yeah. But I was working though 100 hours a week.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was like, I only need to do this for like 27 weeks.
It works. It's the math.
It's math.
That's it.
So I created a to-do list.
Yep.
Next is I made a calendar, and the calendar, my thing is I scheduled time. I blocked out time. I scheduled time for what matters. Now go back to today to get a little meat on the bones again. Today I'm a dad. My wife's out of town this weekend at a cheerleading event. So at 5:30 today, I switched into dad mode. That's what I was doing last night. I was in dad mode. So I'm with my kids tonight from 5:30 until they go to bed. And I blocked out time for that. And tonight I'm taking my kids to a basketball game at Metro Christian. So that is just as important as my work-related activities. But I have to create a to-do
list.
Right. And you have to write down your goals.
Yep.
And then I had to create a calendar. I had to schedule time for what mattered. And for me, my example was I had 3 jobs. I had to schedule time. I had scheduled time for 3 jobs: Applebee's, Target, and DirecTV.
And if you didn't have a calendar, you'd be showing up to the wrong job at the wrong time.
There it is.
Shirt and be crazy.
Yeah. And this is so big. Now, third, you want to surround yourself with successful people in person or virtually only. Okay. So you want to get that done. It's so important. You want to surround yourself only with successful people in person or virtually.
Yep.
You have to do it.
Have to do it.
Now, Bloomer, I have a massive document just outside the door.
Yes.
Can you grab that? And just for a moment, I'm going to switch the screen here. I want to show people this massive thing. It's a massive, like a wood document we just got, or we just ordered here. And there it is. Oh yeah, baby, here it comes. This is going to be awesome. Okay. We just got this for Dr. Zellner, and I'm going to go deliver that to him today. Let's pull it up real quick here. All right, here we go. Let's pull it up nice and okay. We'll right a little closer here. Oh yeah, here we go. So this right here, this is Dr. Zellner's 10 business rules. Let me see if I can get it in here. These are Dr. Zellner's 10 business rules. And he used to teach me these business. We go this way. Ooh, there it is. You can see it now. Okay. So Dr. Zellner used to teach me these business rules, and I made myself kind of a goal that if I ever had success, and he helped me. I would always, be appreciative and tell him thank you. And this is something he taught me, these business rules and systems. And so today I'm going to go deliver this to him. It's custom. It's made out of wood. This thing is solid, babe. Look at this thing.
Sweet.
Oh yeah. Here you go. Oh yeah. So again, you have to surround yourself only with successful people, because if you start surrounding yourself with knuckleheads, nefarious people, double-minded, weak weasels, Bloomer, if you start surrounding yourself with excuse makers and weasels, and what begins to happen?
Yeah, well, you start to become like them, and that's just people most of the time are not intentional about this, and so they just spend their time with whoever's there. So that means, it doesn't mean they're bad people, but that means whoever's your neighbor, whoever you're going to church with, whoever's there, that's who if you spend your time with those people and you're not intentional about, asking yourself, hey, is this somebody I want to become more like? Yeah. Then you're going to become like somebody you don't actually want to be like.
And I know this sounds crazy, and I know people will think I've lost my mind, but usually I don't ask anybody for feedback on my ideas. And you know why, Bloomer?
Why is that?
Because I already know what Dr. Zellner would do. I already know what a lot of the top entrepreneurs, the founder of Hobby Lobby, would do.
Yep.
Because I've read their books.
Right.
And I know what they would do. I know what they would say, Dale Carnegie. I know how they would handle the situation. Dale Carnegie. I know how Dale Carnegie would handle the situation. I know how Napoleon Hill would handle the situation. I know what Robert Kiyosaki would say about buying that property. So I don't need to run it by a committee of people that are not intelligent. Okay. So again, step one, you create a to-do list, write down your goals. Step two, create a calendar, schedule time for what matters. Okay. An example, I scheduled time for 3 jobs. Okay. 3, surround yourself only with successful people in person or virtually. Now, again, I recommend you read Think and Grow Rich. It's such a powerful book. And one of the things he talks about in Think and Grow Rich is he talks about render more service. This is so big. Render more service than you're paid for. It is so big, because if you do that, Bloomer, what's going to happen if you render more service than you're paid to deliver? What's going to happen?
Yeah, so over deliver, and eventually you'll be overpaid. So whether you're working a job and you're still working a job and you don't yet own a business, or if you do own a business and you're over delivering for your clients, no matter, if you continue to do that, you eventually will be overpaid.
So again, what we're going to do here is this is Napoleon Hill. He says, render more service than you are paid for, and eventually you'll be paid for more. It'll be paid more for less service rendered. Again, this idea of exceeding people's expectations, that is such a powerful move. And again, I learned that from Napoleon Hill, from the book Think and Grow Rich. I recommend too, you read the book Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. And 3, I recommend that you read the book How to Win Friends and Influence People. How to Win Friends and Influence People. I recommend you read that book. And Bloomer, if you read that book and you implement it correctly, you should be able to communicate with other humans on the planet effectively. And why is that an important thing?
Well, to reach all your F6 goals, you have to be able to do that. If you want to have a successful business, if you want to ever sell anything, you have to be able to effectively communicate with other people.
Now, if you open your books, folks, here to page 41, I'm going to read this to you. I'm going to read this to you here from, again, page 41 of my book. It says here, in order to pay my way through college, I started a company called DJConnection.com. I grew the business to the point where we were actually providing entertainment for thousands of events per year, as many as 80 events on many weekends before I decided to sell the company. I started out my DJ business by carrying around a backpack full of flyers. I would shove these flyers promoting my next dance party underneath the doors of each and every college student 3 times before each event. I held these events at the local Marriott Hotel located at the corner of 71st and Lewis, which was basically walking distance for most of the student body. I did not have a business license to promote these events. I did not have the proper insurance in place to house over 500 people in one place at one time. I did not own any of my DJ equipment. I didn't even know how to properly operate the equipment that I rented, by the way, but I had nothing to lose. So I produced incredible results that people loved to attend. What? Let's try it again. I didn't even know how to properly operate the DJ equipment, but I had nothing to lose. So I produced incredible events that people loved to attend. Since selling DJconnection.com, I've gone on to start many successful ventures, eitrlounge.com, epicphotos.com, makeyourlifeepic.com, just to name a few, and to coach thousands of business owners through the process of developing in a duplicatable and scalable best practice business, to develop through the process of developing the duplicatable and scalable best practice business systems they need to have in place to grow. I spent the majority of my working hours in conference rooms and workshops and on stage at public speaking events. However, when my son was born blind, and since my dad lost the ability to use his arms and his legs to feed himself and even the ability to breathe on his own, it is becoming increasingly clear to me that my time on this planet is limited, and I must teach these proven systems to people like you faster. My dad died of Lou Gehrig's disease, for people out there that don't know. And so PBS, CNN Money, and countless news outlets have published articles showing that half of the U.S. adults no longer believe in the American dream. This is why I feel like we have a lot of work to do. My friend, this could be your year and your time to thrive. However, you must commit to learning the proven systems, processes, and strategies that you need to know to turn your big visions into reality. Otherwise, your big ideas will never become your reality. Once you learn these systems, you will find yourself enjoying more time freedom, owning a company that is both fun to own and operate. And another notable quotable from Mario Andretti, page 43, says, desire is the key to motivation, but it's the determination and commitment to unrelenting pursuit of your goal, a commitment to excellence that will enable you to attain the success you seek. Again, desire is the key to motivation, but it's the determination and commitment to unrelenting pursuit of your goal, a commitment to excellence that will enable you to attain the success you seek. And I just feel like a lot of people, they read a book like this, they hear a book like this, they hear a show, and they don't activate. And so I have a little commitment letter you can sign right there if you want to sign it. It's not an oath or anything between me and you. It's just kind of between you and you. But it says here, conflicting emotions often get in the way of implementing the motions you need to take. Sign the letter below, and you'll begin to notice your life changing for the better. And it says, I commit myself to dedicating myself to investing the time needed to learn and implement these proven business systems and strategies into my own life. For accountability, take a picture of the signed page and email it to us at info@thrivetimeshow.com. And I put quick disclaimer, for your overall benefit, I have filled this book with 100% true examples and case studies taken from my work with real clients, real families, and real people like you. However, to protect the privacy and confidentiality of thrivers all around the world, often I have changed a few of the variables, names, genders, industries, locations. Nevertheless, these are still 100% fact-based. So throughout the book, I try to give you as many examples where you can go verify the client's name and their business and who they are. And then also, if you go to thrivetimeshow.com, I'll pull this up. We have so many video testimonies. I don't know if people know this. We have over 2,000 client success stories. If you go to thrivetimeshow.com and you click here on testimonials,
it's a lot.
we have over 2,000 client success stories.
It's so many.
So many. And so if you're listening and you're going, well, I don't, can I do it? Well, this is Ron Howell, Keystone Harbor. We helped him. Nathan and Tony, we helped them. These are all real people. Curtis Music. And then we have so many video examples. And I'm telling you, if you're listening out there and you have a sound mind, you can do it. But I want to walk you through 3 big steps. We're going to give a little more information to you today, but you have to create a to-do list. All right. Write down your goals. You have to create a calendar. All right. Schedule time for what matters. And 3, you have to surround yourself only with people in person or virtually. Surround yourself only with successful people in person or virtually. I recommend that you listen to and or read Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki, and How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie until your head explodes. There are other books that you could read, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't, but Bloomer, why do I obsessively believe that most people should listen to these 3 books or read these 3 books over and over and over?
Yeah, because one, the first time you read it, you're not going to get all of the knowledge out of it. So you've got to read it at least more than one time. But those are like the 3 core books that cover desire, like how to achieve a goal. how to make money with Rich Dad, Poor Dad and real estate, and then how to win friends and influence people. That's how to communicate with other people. So all of those three things are like key ingredients that you need for success.
All right, so let's show some meat on the bones from some examples here. This is page 45. This picture is myself, and this picture is my team. These were the DJs back in the day. At the time this picture was taken, I believe I was 22. And this was Josh here. I'm pointing at Josh. This is Doug. This is Carl. This is Jay. Edwin Pagan. This was Josh. This is Willie. This is me. And it says, before I knew how to build businesses, before I knew how to build business systems that were not dependent on me, I used to pride myself on working at each and every trade show that our team went to. My wallet was happy, but my wife was not. Now I know you can truly have both time freedom and financial freedom, and you can build a business model that is capable of working without you. Now, let's talk about the work thing for a second here. Bloomer, have you ever heard of this thing called the Bible?
I have, actually.
And what are your theories, working theories on what the Bible means? What is the Bible? How would you describe what the Bible is?
The Bible is the inspired word of God that is the gospel.
Okay, and I think a lot of people view it as like a mythological thing, as maybe a series of suggestions. I personally do not believe it to be that way. I believe the Bible to be the actual literal word of God, and that which is in the Bible, I believe to be true. And so if you open up your Bible to Genesis, okay, chapter 1, all right, Genesis chapter 1, you're going to discover that God recommends the sixth day. We call this the sixth day principle, okay? So here's a little notable quotable for you. If you want to create like the Creator, all right, like the Creator. If you want to create like the Creator, you must work 6 days. What am I saying? I'm saying in the book of Genesis, God teaches us that he created the earth in 6 days and rested on the seventh. Yes. And I Bloomer, what percentage of people do you think are going, I caught that? What percentage of people in America today do you believe have caught that vision, caught that idea, and have thought, you know what? The Bible is instructing us to work 6 days a week, and maybe I should work 6 and rest on the seventh.
I've met a lot of people who've read a lot of the Bible, and I've never heard, including them, say that or have any sort of work ethic like that. Doesn't happen.
You haven't seen it?
Never seen it.
Why?
I don't know. Because maybe they don't read the Bible. Maybe they don't think the Bible's literal. Maybe because they think God created the earth in 40 hours a week. And
okay, well, let's deal with that in a minute here. So Genesis chapter 1, God teaches us that we work 6 days and rest on the seventh. That's a biblical principle.
It is. Yep.
All right. Now, the book of Exodus, what? It's like a theme. Exodus talks about working on 6 days and resting on the seventh. This is interesting. Exodus chapter 20, it talks about work 6 days and rest on the seventh. Why do you think it's found in Genesis and Exodus, this idea? By the way, the first two books of the Bible, Genesis, Exodus. Why do you think that the Exodus is also talking about working 6 days and then resting on the seventh? Is there a theme to it?
Yeah, when something's repeated, it typically means it's important. So it shouldn't be missed or skipped or not talked about or not done. It should be pretty common.
All right, so let's recap. I want to make sure we're teaching. A lot of times people will listen to audio or a video, and it's like, oh yeah, this is I learned some stuff. I'm wanting to make sure people really are connecting the dots here. Okay,
right.
So one, you got to have a to-do list.
Have to have it.
Then two, you have to have a calendar. Now, for my to-do list, I wrote down my goals. I need $20,000 of equipment to start my company, DJ Connection. So I worked at Applebee's, Target, and DirecTV. That's
right.
And then,
three.
Okay. Then two, I had to create a calendar. Now, I didn't have a fancy digital calendar, didn't have a computer laptop, had a printed physical calendar where I would write my schedule for these jobs.
Yeah.
Applebee's, Target, DirecTV. 3, surround myself with successful people. I only surrounded myself with successful people. I only listened to obsessively Think and Grow Rich, Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki, and How to Win Friends and Influence People. That's all I listened to. I didn't listen to anything else.
Yeah. It's effective.
Once
you do it, if you actually do it, it's very effective.
People say, you listen to Think and Grow Rich 20 times? I mean, probably 200 times.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all I did.
Put on repeat.
I didn't listen to anything else.
Yep.
That's all I did. And then people say, well, you listened to Rich Dad, Poor Dad 200 times? Probably did. I mean, what? That's all I did. Why? Because that's all I wanted to listen to. That's all I needed. I needed to know the moves. Right. Next is I listened to How to Win Friends and Influence People. People say, you've listened to that? Yes. And it's kind of like the book is subconsciously now baked in my brain. Yeah. So it's like whenever I encounter a weird situation with a client, I know how to handle it because I've read these books over and over and over. When I encounter a weird situation with an employee, I know how to handle it because I've read these books over and over and over. Now, again, none of this matters if you're not willing to go out there and work 6 days a week. If you want to create like the creator, you must work 6 days. And I highly recommend you rest on the seventh. It's a biblical idea. That's right. And Bloomer, I feel like a lot of people want to have success. They're just not willing to work 6 days.
That's right. A lot of people want it. They don't know how to get it in 6 days a week.
So in 1938, FDR, okay, he came up with this thing called the Fair Labor Standards Act. The Fair Labor Standards Act. He came up with it in 1938. This is when FDR came out with the Fair Labor Standards Act. Now, this was when he came up with this idea. He introduced the idea of working 40 hours a week. Bloomer, why is that a bad thing for the entrepreneur, the idea of working 40 hours a week or less?
Well, for an entrepreneur, you will never achieve success because within 40 hours, you're going to get the base bare minimum, if even that, done in your business, especially as you're growing and creating systems for a business. You cannot have success in 40 hours a week. You have to put in the work. You have to put in the 80 hours a week or more to build the systems, get everything created, so that you can create that time freedom and that financial freedom.
So Franklin Delano Roosevelt, he was a socialist. Now, Bloomer, I'm not trying to paint you into a corner and ask you about geopolitical things, but
sure.
Why do you think that I'm so opposed to socialism?
Because it's wrong. One, it goes against the Bible. Two, it's against capitalism. And
now the Bible says if you don't work, you don't eat. That's what the Bible says. If you don't work, you don't eat. Now I don't know if people, if there's a different translation that says this more intensely. I'm just going to give you 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 or chapter 3. Verse 10, it says, I'm just giving you the notable quotable here. I'm citing my sources. If you listen to this show for any amount of time at all, you'll notice that's what I will do. I will suffer through the process of not moving on until I cite my sources so that you know that I'm not making up what I'm saying here. This is 2 Thessalonians chapter 3, verse 10 says, for even when we were with you, this we commanded you, that if any would not work, neither should they eat. That's right. Another example, God gave Adam the garden to work it. All right, that was the idea. God gave Adam the Bible to work it. And in the Hebrew language, work means worship, and worship means work.
Yep.
What?
That's right.
Yes. So on part 3 of today's show, I'm going to include an interview with Daniel Rabbi Lapin, where he talks about the work ethic. Because if you don't have that kind of work ethic, you won't be successful. So on today's show, you're going to hear this training from me. You're going to hear Robert Kiyosaki, and you're also going to hear Rabbi Daniel Lapin walking you through the work ethic that you need to have to be successful. It's so important. In the 40-hour work week, people say, well, when did that become normal? When was that introduced? Who gave us the 40-hour work week? Well, FDR gave us the Franklin Delano Roosevelt in 1938, gave us the Fair Labor Standards Act, okay, in 1938. Now, 1938, was that before or after the Bible was written? Just doing some timelining here, Bloomer.
A little bit after.
Okay. And so the guy who introduced the Fair Labor Standards Act was a socialist.
Yeah.
Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the president. Yep. And his wife was a lesbian.
Whoa.
And they introduced the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938. And from that point forward, most people will look at you like you have a third eye if they find out that you worked 6 days.
That's right. They do.
And I don't know what it's like to not work 6 days. Just as an example, let's go back to yesterday's schedule. I finished my day yesterday at about 6 o'clock yesterday. And then what I did, this is what I did yesterday, and I want people to know that this is real stuff. I had a show that I recorded with Dr. Jason Dean. So what I did was I took the kids out to dinner. We had a great time. But then I put that show out later. So that show came out 9 hours ago, which was, I don't know, 10 o'clock or whatever p.m. All I'm saying is there's no, it's not a bad thing. It's not a horrible thing if you work more than 40 hours a week en route to your success. Now, this is where it's going to get a little controversial for somebody out there. My goal is not to do nothing. I never have a desire to retire. The word retire means to retreat from, and the word vocation means your calling. The word vocation means your calling. Vocation, what does that mean? Your calling. It's what you feel called to. All right, that's the idea. So the word vocation, you say, well, what does that mean? Vocation is what you do. It's like what you feel called to do. Your vocation. So your vocation, okay, vocation equals your calling. All right, and the idea of your vacation is this idea of retreating from. Okay, and I'm not wanting to retreat from working because I like it. But you can if you want to. I'm just not going to. So vocation is your calling. Vacation is retreating from. And so I just think if you're listening today as we land the plane, if you listen to today's show and for some reason you get through the show and you don't have the idea branded into your cranium that you need to have a to-do list, that means that I have not effectively communicated this idea with you. You have to have a calendar. You have to schedule time for what matters. 3, you've got to surround yourself only with successful people, in person or virtually. I recommend listening to Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki, and How to Win Friends and Influence People. Next, if you want to create like the creator, you got to work how many days, Bloomer?
6 days a week.
Right. And this idea, if you do that, it blows people's minds. They have they're like, are you sure?
Freaks them out.
It does.
It's weird.
But if you want to have super success, which this show is about how to become sustainably rich, this book is not how to barely make it.
Right.
If you want to do that, this book is about achieving you're an outlier. This book is about achieving super success. If you want to read a book about how to barely make it, how to become an assistant manager at an ice cream and dairy store, then that's not the book. But if you want to learn how to become super successful, this is what we're talking about.
This is the book.
Okay. Now we're going back to the book here. Going back to the book. Okay. And this is on page 45. This right here is a client. Kelly, worked with Kelly for a long time. And Kelly, when we first met Kelly, he was doing $306,000 of sales. Now he's doing $1.4 million of sales. You know what? And a big shout out to Kelly. He implemented the proven systems. That's what he did. Another example, page 46. David and Stacy Whited. Some people know them because of their show. It's called the flyoverconservatives.com. Do you know they grew by 16,000% in the first year they worked with us?
That's crazy.
16,000%.
That's a lot.
16,000.
16,000 is a lot.
They grew their revenue by 16,000% in 12 months.
That's crazy.
Isn't that crazy?
That's a big number.
I'm being real. They now are able to make more money in a month than they used to make in a year.
That's wild.
I just want people to.
That's great.
And that's not abnormal. PMHOKC.com. Let me give you some examples, folks. These are real clients, real companies. Look at this. This is PMHOKC.com. This guy's now doing more revenue in a week than he used to do in 3 months.
It's great.
And these are real clients. So the question is, how does somebody go from hearing this show to actually becoming the next success story? How does that happen? What are the mechanics of that? How does that work? We're going to talk about that in just a moment. So again, you talk about the success. The success was achieved because they decided to take that action. All right. So if you go to, again, the thrivetimeshow.com/millionaire, you can download these books and follow along here. I'm giving you countless examples of clients. Look at this next client here. She grew from $70,000 of revenue to $1.5 million of revenue. These are real examples. These are not mystical examples. These are real things. This next guy, look at this. This guy goes from, in 2017, from $300,000 of revenue to $4.1 million of revenue. $4.1 million of revenue. Think, Bloomer, that is a lot. If you took your company, in his case, Living Water Irrigation, OK.com, and you're going from $300,000 of revenue to $4.1 million of revenue, how appreciative would you be?
I would be incredibly appreciative
because you have grown dramatically.
That's
right?
a big number.
And
That's huge.
Yes. And I'm just telling you. So the question is, will you be the next success story? Now, the thing is, guys like, page 48 here, I meet people like that every day. And every single time I work with an entrepreneur, they become super successful. You know why? Because it's a proven system. It's not a mystical thing. It's not an emotional, spiritual thing. It's not a complicated thing. You just have to follow a proven system. And to quote Harvey Mackey, he said, be like a postage stamp and stick to it until you get there. Okay, so be like a postage stamp and stick to it until you get there. Now, one of the things that we do with a lot of clients is if we help them grow, some clients choose to become partner clients. Now, what's a partner client? It's where a client has said, Bloomer, they say, we're paying you because for out there, for full disclosure, as of right now, 2023, I charge $1,700 a month to coach a client down the proven path. So people go to thrivetimeshow.com and they schedule their free 13-point assessment. And when they do, you just go to thrivetimeshow.com. You go there right now, boom, and you go and you can schedule a 13-point assessment. So when you schedule a 13-point assessment, that 13-point assessment is with me. I share with you my calendar. I try to keep the items in purple are my openings for that. So I try to have 1 to 2 of those meetings a day. Usually we have 10 to 15 people that reach out. We try to only book appointments for people that are a good fit. And then we schedule a 13-point assessment. And when we schedule the 13-point assessment, just like we did with this guy, their business is usually stuck. They don't know how to grow. And again, it's not a spiritual thing. It's not a thing where achieving success is super complicated or that you have to be a super genius to do it. It's just most people, and I'll give you an example of this particular person, they didn't have a website that ranked in Google.
Yep.
They didn't have a logo that made sense. They didn't have auto wraps that made sense. They didn't have business cards that made sense. Their whole system, all their systems needed to grow their business weren't in place.
Right.
They didn't have a marketing system. They didn't have a call script to answer the phones. They didn't have call recording. They didn't have a system in place to hire people, to inspire people, to train people. They didn't have a system in place to manage people. They didn't have a system in place for tracking their numbers. They didn't have an accounting system. They didn't have a way to manage their schedule. They didn't have a bookkeeping system. They didn't have any of the systems in place. And so we build those systems so that anybody out there can have success. And then a lot of people, in this case, they say, well, hey, this is going really well because we have to start people on a scholarship sometimes.
True.
So some people will start on a scholarship.
That's right.
So people like this guy, a lot of times we'll put them on a scholarship.
Yep.
What does a scholarship mean? It means where maybe that $1,700 a month is a little bit outside of what somebody can afford to pay. And I'll say, you know what? I would love to help you. However, I would just like a small percentage of the growth. So we commit to when we just do an agreement where we say, we'll grow your business and we're going to get just a small percentage of the growth. And a lot of clients do that thing. And we have a lot of clients that we are non-equity partners with, where we get a small percentage of the growth. And that works really great for a lot of people, because if you're paying someone 2.5%, Bloomer, think about this. If you were at $300,000 total and you're kind of stuck there with no hope of improvement,
right?
You're out there running billboards that don't work. Now think about this. In this case, billboards are being ran that don't work. You have a website that doesn't work. You have a sales system that doesn't work. You have no clue how to get to the top of Google, but you're networking at all the Christian men's networking events, and you're going to all the local chamber events, and you're investing your time, reading books, and you're having no success. Wouldn't it make sense to pay 2.5% of the growth?
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Because if you don't grow, then there's nothing there. But if you do grow, then you grow.
Yeah. And so just to be very clear, the mechanics of booking an appointment with us is you go to thrivetimeshow.com and you schedule a 13-point assessment. I get on the phone with you. We figure out, where you're at versus where you want to be. We teach you. I give you the plan. You don't have to commit to anything. I'm going to give you a plan. Then if you want to move forward, what we do is we charge $1,700 a month. And our team does the graphic design, the search engine optimization, the branding, the print media, the photography, the videography, the digital marketing, the coaching, the systems creation, the human resources, the workflow mapping, all of that. And we guide you down the proven path. And that's how it works. Okay, let's continue. We're scrolling down here. So we're going to end on page 49 today. This is another client. This client, I met these guys. Their business, Delricht Research, was stuck at $400,000 of revenue. And we grew that thing to $3.78 million in less than 20 months. From $400,000 to $3.7 million in less than 20 months.
It's incredible.
And as we do over and over and over again. So on part 2 of today's show, Bloomer, you're going to hear the interview with Robert Kiyosaki. All right. Robert Kiyosaki, the best-selling author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Yeah.
And on part 3 of today's show, you're going to hear the interview with Daniel Rabbi Lapin, where he talks about the work ethic needed to achieve success. Okay. But we're going to end today's show, or this portion of our training, on page 49 of my new book, A Millionaire's Guide, How to Become Sustainably Rich, a step-by-step guide to building a successful money-generating and time freedom creating business. And we're going to end that on page 49. But you can download the book at thrivetimeshow.com/millionaire. Final housekeeping notes. Bloomer, we have workshops that we do every 2 months. And the reason why I do these workshops is because a lot of people, most people, I would say, prefer to learn hands-on, very interactive. And so the workshops, if you go to thrivetimeshow.com and you click on the conferences button, I've been doing these every 2 months since 2005. I don't know if people recognize this idea. I've been doing business workshops about the same topics for 18 consecutive years. So I've kind of worked through the kinks, worked through the issues in it. It's a very interactive format. The event takes place at my office in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So you'll be at our office. You'll be surrounded by actual entrepreneurs like you. It's a 2-day event, and the tickets work like this. It's $250 or whatever you want to pay.
That's right.
Bloomer, why would we possibly make a scholarship available so everybody can afford to attend the workshop?
Because everyone needs to hear these, how to grow a business. Everyone needs to know how to learn how to become sustainably rich.
Everybody can do it.
They can.
And that's what we do. And so I just encourage everybody out there, this is the system. This is the process. These are the moves. So again, part 1, we taught you what to do. Recap. I think somebody other says, I need it one more time. I'm going to give, because this is all stuff that's not normal. This is what the world doesn't do. 1, you want to have a to-do list. Step 2, you want to have a calendar. 3, you got to surround yourself only with
successful people.
Right. In person or virtually. 4, if you want to create like the creator, you must work 6
days a week.
Right. Okay. Really important. Don't get into the 40-hour work week thing. Don't get into the permanent vacation thing.
Yeah.
You got to carve out time to be successful. Otherwise, your life will always be stressful. My name is Clay Clark. We're going to end this segment with a boom, because boom stands for big, overwhelming, optimistic momentum. I can't wait to see you at an in-person workshop or to talk to you on a 13-point assessment. And here we go. Without any further ado, 3, 2, 1, boom.
Hello, my name is Charles Kolaw with Kolaw Fitness. Today I want to tell you a little bit about Clay Clark and how I know Clay Clark. Clay Clark has been my business coach since 2017. He's helped us grow from 2 locations to now 6 locations. We're planning to do 7 locations in 7 years and then franchise. And Clay has done a great job of helping us navigate anything that has to do with like running the business, building the systems, the checklists, the workflows, the audits, how to navigate lease agreements, how to buy property, how to work with brokers and builders. This guy is just amazing. He's this kind of guy has worked in every single industry. He's written books with like Lee Cockrell, head of Disney, with the 40,000 cast members. He's friends with like Michael and Dale. He does Reawaken America tours, where he does these tours all across the country, where 10,000 or more people show up to some of these tours. On the day-to-day, he does anywhere from about 160 companies. He's at the top. He has a team of business coaches, videographers, and graphic designers and web developers, and they run 160 companies every single week. So think of this guy with a team of business coaches running 160 companies. So in the weekly, he's running 160 companies. Every 6 to 8 weeks, he's doing Reawaken America tours. Every 6 to 8 weeks, he's also doing business conferences where 200 people show up, and he teaches people a 13-step proven system that he's done and worked with billionaires, helping them grow their companies. So I've seen guys from startups go from startup to being multimillionaires, teaching people how to get time freedom and financial freedom through the system. Critical thinking, document creation, putting it into organizing everything in their head to building it into a franchisable, scalable business. Like one of his businesses has like 500 franchises. That's just one of the companies or brands that he works with. So amazing guy. Elon Musk kind of like smart guy. He kind of comes off sometimes as socially awkward, but he's so brilliant, and he's taught me so much. When I say that, like Clay is like, he doesn't care what people think when you're talking to him. He cares about where you're going in your life and where he can get you to go. And that's what I like most about him. He's like a good coach. A coach isn't just making you feel good all the time. A coach is actually helping you get to the best you. And Clay has been an amazing business coach. Through the course of that, we became friends. I was really most impressed with him is when I was shadowing him one time. We went into a business deal and listened to it. I got to shadow and listen to it. And when we walked out, I knew that he could make millions on the deal. And they were super excited about working with him. And he told me, he's like, I'm not going to touch it. I'm going to turn it down, because he knew it was going to harm the common good of people in the long run. And the guy's integrity just really wowed me. It brought tears to my eyes to see that this guy, his highest desire was to do what's right. And anyways, just an amazing man. So anyways, impacted me a lot. He's helped navigate anytime I've got nervous or worried about how to run the company, or navigating competition and an economy that's like, I remember we got closed down for 3 months. He helped us navigate on how to stay open, how to get back open, how to just survive through all the COVID shutdowns, lockdowns, because our clubs were all closed for 3 months, and you have $350,000 of bills you got to pay, and we have no accounts receivable. He helped us navigate that, and of course we were conservative enough that we could afford to take that on for a period of time. But it was anyways, great man. I'm very impressed with him. So Clay, thank you for everything you're doing, and I encourage you, if you haven't worked with Clay, work with Clay. He's going to help magnify you, and there's nobody I have ever met that has the ability to work as hard as he does. He probably sleeps 4, maybe 6 hours a day, and literally the rest of the time he's working, and he can outwork everybody in the room every single day, and he loves it. So anyways, this is Charles Kolaw with Kolaw Fitness. Thank you, Clay, and anybody out there that's wanting to work with Clay, it's a great opportunity to ever work with him. So you guys have a blessed one. This is Charles Kolaw. We'll see you guys. Bye-bye.
The Thrivetime Show 2-day interactive business workshops are the highest and most reviewed business workshops on the planet.
You can learn the proven 13-point business systems that Dr. Zellner and I have used over and over to start and grow successful companies. I mean, we get into the specific steps on what you need to do to optimize your website. We're going to teach you how to fix your conversion rate. We're going to teach you how to do a social media marketing campaign that works. How do you raise capital? How do you get a small business loan? We teach you everything you need to know here during a 2-day, 15-hour workshop. It's all here for you. You work every day in your business, but for 2 days you can escape and work on your business and build these proven systems, so now you can have a successful company that will produce both the time freedom and the financial freedom that you deserve. You're going to leave energized, motivated, but you're also going to leave empowered. The reason why I've built these workshops is because as an entrepreneur, I always wish that I had this. And because there wasn't anything like this, I would go to these motivational seminars, no money down, real estate, Ponzi scheme, get motivated seminars, and they would never teach me anything. It was like you went there and you paid for the big chocolate Easter bunny, but inside of it, it was a hollow nothingness. And I wanted the knowledge, and they're like, oh, but we'll teach you the knowledge after our next workshop. And the great thing is we have nothing to upsell. At every workshop, we teach you what you need to know. There's no one in the back of the room trying to sell you some next big get-rich-quick, walk-on-hot-coals product. It's literally, we teach you the brass tacks, the specific stuff that you need to know to learn how to start and grow a business. And I encourage you to not believe what I'm saying, and I want you to Google the Z66 auto auction. I want you to Google elephant in the room. Look at Robert Zellner and Associates. Look them up and say, are they successful because they're geniuses, or are they successful because they have a proven system? When you do that research, you will discover that the same systems that we use in our own business can be used in your business. Come to Tulsa, book a ticket, and I guarantee you it's going to be the best business workshop ever, and we'll even give you your money back if you don't love it. We've built this facility for you, and we're excited to see you.
Well, the Great Reset is the collapse of the dollar, the fiat money system. But the reason I'm into gold is because the Great Reset will be the collapse of the dollar system. And that started back in 1971 when Nixon took the dollar off the gold standard. I'm very concerned. And it's more than just the US. There's a thing called the BRICS nations. BRICS stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. And what happened in 2021, I believe, when we abandoned Afghanistan, on that day, Saudi Arabia shifted allegiances from America, trading in dollars, petrodollars. Saudi Arabia switched sides to China and Russia. It's the end of the dollar system. So the end is near for the US dollar, and my concern is it's going to wipe out stocks, bonds, mutual funds, ETFs. Just for my generation, the boomer generation, we're in serious trouble, because the only reason our stocks, bonds, mutual funds are up is because the Fed and the Treasury just kept printing more and more money. Instead of fixing the problem from 2008, they just kept printing more money. And it's about to come to an end. So that's why when I say to people, buy gold, silver, and Bitcoin. You know, you want to stay in what I call real assets, tangible assets. That's my opinion. Most people say buy US Treasuries. That's Harry Dent. I wouldn't trust anything printed by the US government, but that's me. I don't like anything that can be printed. There was this guy, Klaus Schwab, in the Great Reset. And the Great Reset will be the collapse of the dollar. And what's happened with China, China's putting in the Belt and Road project. 90% of the population is going to be dealing in Chinese yuan, not US dollars. And America is, I hate to say that, the Fed is pretty corrupt. You know, everybody says, oh, don't fight the Fed, trust the Fed and all that stuff. I don't trust them at all.
Yes, 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 and yes. Aaron Antis, you now run Oklahoma's largest home building company, one of the largest home building companies in Oklahoma.
Yes, sir.
I'm now an entrepreneur with multiple different businesses, and both of us, we both read this little book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Oh, yeah.
20 some odd years ago, and it changed our lives. You were in Michigan.
I was living in my mom's basement
True
in
story.
Michigan, completely buried in debt, had no sight of how to get out, no college education, flunked out of college.
And I was at an Oral Roberts University dorm room, had no idea how to achieve success. And I read this thing called the cash flow quadrant. It said we have to become a great employee, and then we have to become self-employed. And then after that, we get to become a business owner, and then we get to become an investor. So here we are, both of us are investors, and we get to interview the man, the myth, the legend who created the cash flow quadrant. Woo! Robert Kiyosaki, welcome onto the Thrivetime show. How are you, sir?
Boy, you guys are already pumped up. I mean, I moved to Oklahoma. Anyway, thank you for the kind words. At my old age, to have young people like you saying the book changed their lives is probably the biggest spiritual juice I get. You know, it's because
brother, it changed my life. Changed my life. I probably purchased conservatively 1,000 copies of your book, given it to folks. And so I wanted to tap into your wisdom on part one about the cash flow quadrant, because we have a lot of people listening to the show that will become the future generation of entrepreneurs if we can save capitalism in America. Sir, can you walk us through the cash flow quadrant? And I think it's embroidered on the chair behind you.
Sure, it's right there.
There it is.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But this is my etching of it. And E stands for employee. S stands for self-employed, small business, or a specialist like a doctor or a lawyer. It also stands for smart person. And then B stands for big business, according to the Internal Revenue Service. It's 500 employees or more. But B also stands for brand, like McDonald's is a brand. And brands are very, very valuable assets. And then I stands for investor, but it's actually an inside investor. And so when I was a kid, 10 years old, studying with my rich dad, he would walk me through this and be talking about your mindset. So on this side is my poor dad, go to school, get a job. He was a PhD in education. This is my mom. She wanted me to become a doctor or a lawyer. And I said to my mom, the only problem with that, Mom, is you have to be smart. She says, you're right. I guess you're not going to be a doctor or a lawyer. Because I really didn't like school, And then, so my rich dad was over here, and he was building a massive, massive business throughout Hawaii. So when you go to Hawaii today, if you look at Waikiki Beach, you'll see the Hyatt Regency Hotel. Rich Dad, as an inside investor, assembled all that property. And then another investor took it off his hands and built a Hyatt on it. So I watched both my poor dad and my rich dad. I watched my rich dad get richer and richer and richer, but my poor dad get poorer and poorer and poorer.
Now, I wanted to ask you this, Robert. For somebody out there listening right now, if they're an employee, okay, and let's just, because I'm going back to my 18-year-old mind. I was working at Target, Applebee's, and DirecTV. I was doing a poor job at Target, a poor job at Applebee's, and a poor job at DirecTV. And I read your book, and I'm going, I have to do a good job because I need to be able to get ahead, to become self-employed. What would you say to somebody who's kind of stuck in that rut of they're always late, never getting things done? They're the perpetuating cycle of fail employee right there. What would you say to that employee right there that's kind of stuck in that rut right now?
Yeah, but it goes deeper than that, Clay. The numbers here stand for taxes. So this is worldwide. They're pretty much worldwide. Employees pay about 40% of their income in taxes. The small business entrepreneur pays 60%. Now, when Biden wants to hire 87,000 IRS agents, he's going after this guy here.
Yeah.
These guys are already screwed. I mean, they take their taxes out before you get paid.
Yeah.
But these guys here, the IRS has to go after them. So the small business guy is going to get screwed by Biden. I mean, I hope I'm not Republican or Democrat. Trump is my friend. But these are the guys are going to go after. So what happens to a young person? They say, I want to quit my job and start a business. Well, you move into a higher tax bracket. If you understand that thing, okay. And on this side, because you have employees, lots of employees, I only pay 20%. But as an insider, I can pay 0% legally. I don't want to go to jail and become somebody's boyfriend. Whoa. So I want to be an insider all the time. So that's my way of saying I don't own stocks, bonds, mutual funds, ETFs. I don't touch anything the stock market pumps out. I don't trust the dollar. I don't trust the treasury, and I definitely don't trust government. So that's kind of why this is so important today, especially today. And with 87,000 IRS agents coming out, you'd better get a great CPA, a tax guy. Okay, that's the big difference.
Yeah.
Now, since you brought up Biden for a second, here we'll get into that now. You, I believe, are not only a best-selling author, not only an investor, but I believe you're a man who was kicked out of Freedom Fest. Could you please explain to us, is that true? Am I making that up? Did you get kicked out of Freedom Fest, and if so, why?
What was the question, please?
Did you get kicked out of Freedom Fest?
Yes.
Could you?
Yes.
Again, you stand for freedom. You come across as a libertarian for me. Why would you get kicked out of Freedom Fest when you were?
Well, apparently the person that puts on, I won't mention his name. Well, he comes after me every time. I won't mention his name, but I have no idea because I was talking about a stock market crash, and he got very angry at me. He says, "Markets don't crash." I'm going, "Are you kidding me? What happened in 2008? What's happening right now?" So my concern is a lot of times things are misnamed, like, the Inflation Reduction Act, IRA, has nothing to do with inflation. It has to do with the Green New Deal.
Right.
So I'm always concerned when people pump out these things like the Freedom Fest and all that. But I got hammered for talking about how you prepare for a crash. And the reason I say that is because when markets crash, it's the best time to get rich. That's like Neiman Marcus having a sale. So I like crashes, but this guy came after me so hard. He still does. I was up in Vancouver and he still came after me. He says, "How dare you say markets crash?" I'm going, but they do crash. And so anyway, I really don't know why he's after me, but he's come after me every single time, and he's the promoter of Freedom Fest.
Now, a lot of people have noticed, well, there's a mask mandate, there's a lockdown, there's a quarantine, there's a curfew. There's Biden speaking at the World Economic Forum 2016 event at Davos. There seems to be a lot of chatter related to Klaus Schwab and Yuval Noah Harari. And now people who have chosen not to talk about it or think about it, the Great Reset is here, and it's impacting everybody in some way, shape, or form. Could you comment on what the Great Reset is and how it is impacting American business?
Well, the Great Reset is the collapse of the dollar, the fiat money system. And that's why when I speak, I don't think it's good or bad. I am an inside investor. I'm a real estate guy. I also took this this is my latest accomplishment. It's I took this company public on the New York Stock Exchange. I've taken 3 companies public on Toronto Stock Exchange, but this is my first New York Stock Exchange, and it's the richest gold mine in America. And so I do practice what I teach. But the reason I'm into gold is because the Great Reset will be the collapse of the dollar system. And that started back in 1971 when Nixon took the dollar off the gold standard. And in 1971, I was in Vietnam. I was a Marine helicopter gunship pilot. And I'm going, what the heck does this mean? We're off the gold standard. And I had no idea. So because we don't teach money at school, and my co-pilot and I flew behind enemy lines to look for gold, proving Marines aren't the brightest guys on earth, But, I'm sitting there looking for gold from a gold mine, and this little Vietnamese woman with red teeth, they always chew betel nuts. And I was trying to get a discount on gold. So gold was 35 an ounce in 71. And by the time I got there, it was $50 an ounce. And so I tried to get a discount because, behind enemy line discounts. And she looked at me and laughed her ass off. Just smiled with the red teeth. She says, spot. I said, what the hell, spot? I got a spot on my shirt or something? She didn't speak English. I didn't speak Vietnamese. But then I realized gold is international money. Gold is real money. And ever since then, I became a gold bug, which is why I'm very happy to take this company public. I'll give you the name of it. I wouldn't invest in it. It's called ODV. You have to do your research on it, but it's the richest gold mine in America. It's 140 years old. And it was just sitting there in Provo, Utah. So there's opportunities everywhere, but I want to be this kind of investor. I don't want stocks, bonds, mutual funds, ETFs that I don't own.
Robert, the name of your gold mine is what now? What's the name of the gold mine investment company?
They call it the Trixie Mine, but the call sign is ODV. Just check it out. The reason it's important because the guy who put it together is a Canadian. And I spent a lot of time in Canada, in Vancouver, putting gold deals together because I'm an entrepreneur. And this guy found this gold mine 140 years old, and he used technology. He looked at it, and he got 140 years of records from these old gold miners, the guys with the burro and the pick. And he took all their records and he digitalized it.
Wow.
I'm going, how'd you do that? That guy's really smart, obviously. But he digitalized it. And then once it was digitalized, he could put it into pictures. And he was going through the records, digitalizing all the records of these gold miners from 140 years ago in Utah.
Yeah.
And it says, oh my God, they missed the vein. I went, what? He says they missed the vein. And so that's why the Trixie Mine, or ODV, is now the richest gold mine in America. It was sitting there. It was sitting there empty. So there's opportunities everywhere, I'm saying,
Wow.
Now, I have 2 quick questions for you, and then I'm going to go to Aaron here. As it relates to the value of gold, the price of an ounce of gold in 1971 was approximately $40 an ounce. In 1991, it was $360 an ounce. Then you move on to 2011, it's $1,500 an ounce. Now we'll call it $1,800 an ounce. And I think a lot of people want to hear from you right now. On a scale of 1 to 10, if 10 is like you are very concerned about the collapse of the dollar, like if 10 is you are sounding the alarm, you're very worried, and a 1 is you're not concerned at all. about the collapse of the dollar. How concerned are you about the collapse of the U.S. dollar, sir?
I'm very concerned. And it's more than just the U.S. There's a thing called the BRICS nations. BRICS stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. And what happened in 2021, I believe, when we abandoned Afghanistan, on that day, Saudi Arabia shifted allegiances from America, trading in dollars, petrodollars. Saudi Arabia switched sides to China and Russia. It's the end of the dollar system. So the end is near for the US dollar. And my concern is it's going to wipe out stocks, bonds, mutual funds, ETFs. Just for my generation, the boomer generation, we're in serious trouble because the only reason our stocks, bonds, mutual funds are up is because the Fed and the Treasury just kept printing more and more money. Instead of fixing the problem from 2008, they just kept printing more money. And it's about to come to an end. So that's why when I say to people, buy gold, silver, and Bitcoin, you want to stay in what I call real assets, tangible assets. That's my opinion. Most people say buy US Treasuries. That's Harry Dent. I wouldn't trust anything printed by the US government, but that's me. I don't like anything that can be printed.
Now, the BRICS nations, again, to repeat for everybody who's hearing this for the first time, you might hear about the BRICS nations. That's Brazil, Russia, India, China, Africa. Those comprise roughly 41% of the Earth's population, and they are teaming up together to unseat the U.S. dollar as the world's reserve currency. And now you have Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Mexico, Nigeria, Venezuela, Algeria, Turkey, and Argentina all teaming up to unseat the U.S. dollar as the world's U.S.
You're on it, man. You're on it. Everybody, listen to this guy. He knows what he's talking about. You have the macro picture. Very few people have that point of view.
So if let's just say that the U.S. dollar becomes no longer the world's reserve currency, what will happen to the value of the dollar, sir?
Well, I think you were touching on it before. There was this guy, Klaus Schwab, and the Great Reset. And the Great Reset will be the collapse of the dollar. And what's happened with China, China's putting in the Belt and Road project. 90% of the population is going to be dealing in Chinese yuan, not US dollars.
Right.
And America is, I hate to say that, the Fed is pretty corrupt. Everybody says, don't fight the Fed, trust the Fed and all that stuff. I don't trust them at all. I don't trust anything that can be printed. But that's why I tell the story of being a Marine pilot, flying behind enemy lines with my helicopter and finding out what gold was. This is 1972. I'm going, holy mackerel, why don't we teach this at school? So that's my concern. And I commend you. Cash Patel is a stud, but boy, your stuff too. I'm very impressed.
Well, I'll say this, the Reawaken America tour, we have, Eric Trump's on it, Cash Patel, General Flynn, Michael Lindell, Dr. Tenpenny, so many, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And people always ask me, Clay, what is the common denominator between all of the speakers? Because we have Republicans, Democrats, Libertarians, entrepreneurs. And I tell people, the reason why we do the Reawaken America tour events and the reason why we have millions of people that stream every event is because we share the truth. And it's embarrassing for Republicans and it's embarrassing for Democrats, and it's called the truth. And that's why I wanted to interview you. Now, Aaron, Robert Kiyosaki, I would call his ministry of money has made a big impact on your life.
Massive.
What questions do you have for Robert Kiyosaki?
It's kind of interesting, Robert. You don't know this, but you really changed my life. Back when I was living in my mom's basement back in my early 20s, a friend of mine who was the vice president of one of the largest home builders in the country lived 5 doors down from us, and he handed me your book. And he said, Aaron, if you'll read this book, it'll change your perspective on life. And I went to grab it and he snatched it out of my hand. And he said, you didn't think I was going to give it to you, did you? He said, if you go across the street to that bookstore and pay $14.95 for it like I did, there's a chance you might read it. But if I hand it to you, you're going to chuck it in the back seat and never read it. I read the whole thing in one sitting that night. Wow. And I got ticked because I had been in college. I had been flunked out of college and I was living in my mom's basement, broke. And I said, I got to see a different way. I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and then later the Cash Flow Quadrant. And I've read Rich Dad, Poor Dad about 25 times since then, just trying to like see if there's anything else I'm missing in there. So thank you for that. It allowed me to stay married. Today's my 25th anniversary. It allowed me to stay married to my wife because I was really broke when she met me, and we're doing better now. So thank you for helping me stay married too. So I do have a question for you though. So with all this stuff that's going on, I mean, obviously Clay kind of brought me into the podcast when the Great Reset stuff started happening back when COVID began and everything. Because I'm a guy who's like, I want to go make money, do business. I don't want to be involved in all this other stuff. But I know that China has said years and years ago, decades ago, that they were going to take over America without ever firing a single shot. And I think most people don't recognize that World War III may have already started. And because there's not Chinese troops coming up on the shores of the Atlantic or Pacific in boats, they think there's no war going on. So do you see it as a hostile takeover of China trying to sort of, become the dominant force in the world and coming after us and subverting what America is trying to do? Is that what you're perceiving going on right now?
Well, let's go back to BRICS: Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa.
Yeah.
Now, the way I started stumbling through all of this stuff was in 1965. I mean, I flunked out of high school twice because I can't write. Ironic, isn't it?
Yeah. Right.
It's not that I can't write. The teacher didn't like what I was saying.
Yeah.
So there is censorship in the classroom, as you know. But in 1965, I go to school in New York. I went to military school. I got nominations to Naval Academy, Merchant Marine Academy, and West Point. Because I'm not stupid. I just don't like school. And so I chose Kings Point in New York. We're the highest paid graduates in the world. So I really did want to go to sea. I studied oil, and I drove tankers for Standard Oil when I graduated. But in 1965, my economics teacher had me read this book here. It's called The Communist Manifesto. It's only 40 or 50 pages. But when I read this book, every question you ask me is coming true today. And when I read this book, I realized my father, poor dad, is a communist. He believed in labor unions, abolition of private property. He hated the rich, and rich dad was a capitalist. So the C stands for capitalist here.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where the battle began. And the question is this: the invasion came, according to this book here, came through the school system. So what Marx wrote, he says it would come in two phases: communism. It would come first as socialism, and that occurred in 1930. And in 1930, the communists out of Europe sent teachers to Columbia University. And today, Columbia University is one of the most hard Marxist organizations going. So they came into America via Columbia University Teachers College. So you guys are too young to remember this, but this is 65. 1930 that happened. I'm in school in New York in 1965, and that's when the riots started to come out. We started rioting. So I'm in New York City, and they're rioting. It was students, and that led to Kent State and the protests against the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
So I volunteered for the U.S. Marine Corps to fight for my country. And I came back. I landed at Norton Air Force Base in 73, January 10th, 1973. And I got hit by eggs and spit on and all this stuff by all the students from Berkeley. And they're still up, you know what I mean? And they're so hard left, but it started with this book here saying that it would happen in 1930, that's when they invaded America via the academic system. 2020 was phase 2. And that's when they took down President Trump. How can they censor us via social media?
Right.
And so in 2020 was phase 2 of this book here, written in 1848.
So good. And I have one follow-up question to that. So with, when I read your book and it, talked about in Rich Dad, Poor Dad about, the rich don't work for money. And just the concept of the cash flow quadrant and everything with, Joe Biden had done the executive order 14067, which talks about the central bank digital currency on December 13th being enacted and cash money going away. The principles that are taught in the cash flow quadrant, are those principles rolling forward into a digital currency environment we find ourselves in? And if the American dollar goes to the bottom of the heap, as I think, could be happening and the markets crash, do the principles in the cash flow quadrant still hold true moving forward into that America that the Democratic Party, or really the Communist Party, seems hell bent on carrying us into? Whoever's the president right now, and I just assume that's the person writing everything on the teleprompter for Biden, whoever that person is that in that America, do those principles still hold true in the coming days?
That's a tough question, but obviously Biden is a communist.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Look at it's not what he says, it's what is he doing.
Right.
I went at the academy, and military officers in the Marine Corps, we're taught to watch what a person does, not what they say, or actions speak louder than words. And look at his actions. He opens the border wide open. He takes us out of Afghanistan. And the day he pulled us out of Afghanistan, Saudi Arabia pledged allegiance to Russia. BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. Yeah. So the day Biden pulled us out of Afghanistan, Saudi Arabia shifted the petrodollar from the US dollar to the yuan.
Right.
We got screwed by Biden big time. Just watch what he does, not what he says. So he doesn't say anything anyway, so why bother, Yeah. And that picture you had of him giving that speech with the red behind of him and two Marines, that was disgusting. As a U.S. Marine, I would not stand there.
Yeah.
I would not stand there for that man. Or Kamala. They're communists, as far as I'm concerned.
Yes.
I watch what they do, not what they say.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to go into a rapid fire 90 mile an hour question bonanza here, because you have lowered your standards one time to be on the show. So I'm excited about it. I got you on the show one time, so I got to go for it. Here we go. You wrote in one of your books, you said confidence comes from discipline and training. I wrote that down, put it in my journal. I thought, I'm going to do that. So every morning I like to wake up at 3 a.m. I go to bed at 9 p.m. I've been doing that for 21 years. That really helps me to understand that confidence comes from discipline and training. You don't just have confidence. You have to have discipline and training to earn that confidence. What would you say to any of the listeners out there that are maybe not structured, they're not organized, thus they don't have confidence, and they want to become more disciplined or more organized and get that confidence? What would you say to the listeners out there?
Well, it's crucial. I mean, I've had my challenges with my discipline myself a lot. I'm very open about it. I was court-martialed twice because I had disciplinary problems. And so I've had my challenges, which is the best thing, because when you make a mistake, you have a chance to correct. So the U.S. Marine Corps did a lot of good for me because I'm a lieutenant. And my roommate and I were both lieutenants on this carrier in Vietnam. And he went on to become a lieutenant general. And today he's a congressman from Michigan, and I got kicked out as a lieutenant. But we're still the best of friends. But that's what the Marines say, Semper Fi. We're always the best of friends. We're loyal to each other, but we all go by different paths. So discipline and all that is good. But the most important discipline is this: if you break the law, own up to it. Mm-hmm. I broke the law. I got caught flying women in my helicopter in Hawaii, drunk as a swine, having a good time. Whoa! So when they caught me, I'm going, yeah, I did it. And so
now, were the women in the helicopter drunk, or were you drunk while flying a helicopter?
Well, I was talking to this young woman. She says, "Have you ever had a DUI?" I said, "No, I've had an FUI, flying under the influence." Like I said, I learned the hard way, and the biggest discipline is when you screw up, own it, tell the truth.
Yeah.
So I got hauled into a court martial. I sit down there, and it was a prosecutor named Captain Abrams, really sharp guy. And he says, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I said, I do. And I told him everything. I told him everything I had been doing. They never caught me for anyway. You see that movie, A Few Good Men, with Jack Nicholson?
Oh, yeah.
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 That was what Nicholson was on trial for, as Colonel Jessup, was exactly the same as me. I falsified fuel records. So in A Few Good Men, Nicholson and those guys falsified the records. I did the same thing. So here I am, years earlier, on trial in Marine Corps Air Station, Kaneohe, Hawaii. And they caught me flying drunk. I had women's underwear in my aircraft. I had beer cans everywhere. I found a dead deer because I was shooting deer out of my helicopter. And I just sat there and I told the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. But this was my lesson. Okay. So I asked Captain Abrams and said, how many years will I go to jail? He says, you're free. I went, what? He says, you will receive an honorable discharge. Thank you for telling the truth.
Wow.
And then I said, why are you doing this? He says, because we're not after you. We're after your colonel, just like Few Good Men.
Wow.
And so, this nothing worse than a reformed alcoholic. Well, for me, it's a reformed liar. So I would rather tell you guys the truth than pretend, because screwing up and correcting off of it is the best thing. That's how we learn. So, a baby learns to walk by falling down.
Right.
You learn to ride a bicycle by falling off. And you learn to be a human being by making mistakes. And so that's why academics doesn't work, because they punish you for making mistakes.
Right.
So that's why guys like Clinton, who says, I didn't have sex with that woman. Well, because he didn't define what sex was. You know what I mean?
Right.
Now, I got to ask you this, Robert. I when I built my first business, it was called djconnection.com. I don't own it anymore, but we used to do about 4,000 weddings and corporate events per year. And I remember reading in your book, you said that assets put money in your pocket and liabilities take money out of your pocket. And I started thinking, all this equipment that I have in the storage facility, if I don't book the shows and get the equipment working 7 days a week, every day of the week that my equipment is sitting in the storage facility, not generating income, that equipment is a liability. So I need to get my guys out there. I need to do events on Mondays and Tuesdays and Wednesdays and Thursdays, do some discounted events, and still do the weddings and events on Saturdays and Sundays and Fridays. The big events in the entertainment business are Friday and Saturday. But the rest of the week, I've got to get this equipment out there working for me. Where do most people get it wrong as it relates to their understanding of liabilities and assets? You've done so many workshops. I mean, you've done thousands of workshops. Where do people get it wrong?
Well, that's one of the most important questions you've asked, because in keeping it super simple, right? It's the differences in the definition of words. You see, the question I always ask people, do you speak the language of money? And most people, what do you mean the language of money? I said, and then from, I think it's John 4:1, I'm not really religious, but, and the word became flesh. We become our words. So the difference between my poor dad and my rich dad was very simple. My poor dad called and he called liabilities assets. My poor dad always said, our house is an asset. And my rich dad said, your father may be a PhD, but he's calling liabilities assets. And that's where people go wrong. They call something that is not. So most people think they have assets, like their car, their college education, and all that. They're all liabilities. And it always starts with the word. And the word became flesh and dwelt amongst us. So if you don't, the best news is words are free. You change your words, which is why I wrote Rich Dad, Poor Dad, assets versus liabilities. It changed your life because you started saying, well, maybe I'm calling liabilities assets. So most people say, well, I have an asset that's an SUV. That's a big liability. I own a house that's an asset. That's a big liability because you got insurance, you got taxes, you got all that stuff on it.
Both Aaron and I, Robert, both Aaron and I employ, many employees. That's what we do. And, Aaron, I'm sure you have an additional question about this, but I want to hammer into this real quick here. I see an employee, they have a degree from Oklahoma State University, or, they'll come to me often from University of Florida, some college. They show up, they've got $100,000 of debt. They've got a monthly student loan payment. They're driving in an SUV with a massive monthly payment. And they show up and they say, so how much are you guys going to pay me? And they have no discernible skills. And most of them have a degree in business. And so when you wrote in your book, you said, I am pro-education. I'm just anti the system. And I've heard you say it in many ways, shapes, and forms. I understand what you mean, but there's people listening right now who have an SUV with a massive payment. They have a college degree with no actual practical skills. And they have a lot of degrees, more degrees than a thermometer, but they have no practical skills. Could you clarify what you mean when you often say, I'm pro-education, I'm just anti-system?
Well, it goes back again to the question I always ask is, what does school teach you about money? And for most people, it's nothing. The next question is, do you think that's a mistake? I mean, do you think that's a mistake, or is it intentional? So that's why, I talk about my book, Capitalist Manifesto, this book here. And this is the book I wrote this year. And it's in response to the Communist Manifesto. But listen to this, okay, is we were warned. I'll say it again. In the Communist Manifesto by Marx, he said communism would come in two stages. Stage one was 1930. When Columbia University was taken over by communists and still is communist today. Dennis Prager, he calls Columbia one of the worst places you can go to. And then, so in this book here, Capitalist Manifesto, it says, we were warned. He says, this is from Nikita Khrushchev, 1959. He says, your children's children will live under communism. You Americans are so gullible. No, you won't accept communism outright. But we will keep feeding you small doses of socialism. And that's through our schools until you finally wake up and find you already have communism.
Right.
We will not have to fight you. We will so weaken your economy until you fall like overripe fruit into our hands. Nikita Khrushchev, 1959. This book is nothing but quotes from Stalin, from Marx, from all these guys. But the problem is most academics, like my poor dad, never read the Communist Manifesto. So they do not know they're communists.
So good.
Aaron,
I had a question about, you had a quote where you said that, you really all you need for success, and I'm paraphrasing, but really all you need for success is simple math skills and some common sense.
There we go.
And so, when my wife and I actually taking that last quote you just used, my wife and I basically homeschooled our kids, and we did that so that they wouldn't get indoctrinated because they're not public schools, they're government schools. And so we wanted to make sure they learned a love for learning so that they would continue to educate themselves after the fact, because we're very pro-education. And so we've created children that are like that. But what happens is, people start studying certain things. And when you go down a certain path of study, you get more and more and more specialized, which makes it harder and harder to turn into a B or an I, in my opinion. So what are the things, you said common sense, which isn't that common, and simple math skills, you can be successful. What are the things that, you would spend time on studying and learning? Because obviously you're a lifelong learner as well. Where would you go to get the learning that you need to be successful, if you're our listeners out there?
Well, that's a great question. Again, let's go back to book number 2, The Quadrant. Yeah. You're talking about the specialists. So what academics do, you go to, you become a doctor, you're a general practitioner, then you specialize. You're an orthopedic surgeon, heart, you just keep being more specialized. But you get trapped in here and you pay the highest taxes. You can't get out. Yeah. So when I talk to parents, and I don't have kids, so I really have not qualified to talk to them, I said, the difference is is your child a golfer or a football player? And you see, the thing that we were taught in the Marine Corps is Marines fight as teams. You know, when I flew in, we flew in with flights of, the gunships were 4 gunships. We always fought as a team. And when I talk to people who are golfers, they want to do it by themselves. There's nothing right or wrong about it.
Yep.
But a golfer is here,
Yeah.
and a team player is out here. So I'm not the smartest guy, but I hire very smart specialists. I employ these guys. My tax guy, he wrote the book Tax-Free Wealth. He's Tom Wheelwright. I don't pay taxes, and I don't want to become an accountant. I just call Tom up, and that's his. He's a specialist here.
He's the golfer.
He's actually a triathlete, which is even more nuts. But anyway,
Yeah.
But he's a great team player. And so in school, being a team player means you're cheating. I was very cooperative in school. C stands for capitalist, cooperative, all that stuff. But in school, they want you to take the test on your own.
Yeah.
So this is my. I asked my accountant to write this book. It's called Tax-Free Wealth, because as I said, 87,500 IRS agents are coming after this guy here.
Right.
And why are they going to pick on this guy? Because they can't afford to fight the government. For me to fight the tax man, I have to have good accountants and attorneys.
Right.
So these guys here are not going to be touched, but the 87,000 IRS agents are going after this person, all the small business owners.
Robert,
That's what's happening today.
Yeah.
A lot of people that listen to our show, previous to this whole Great Reset nonsense, we were number 1 on iTunes 6 different times. And so we would interview folks like, Damon John or Wolfgang Puck, and they would hop on the show. We'd talk about business. And so a lot of our listeners have avoided talking about anything related to the Great Reset. And recently, many of them have texted me, which caused me to reach out to you, because they texted me and they said, dude, Robert Kiyosaki just talked about the Great Reset on his show. And they said, dude, Robert Kiyosaki's talked about the Great Reset on like 10 of the past 40 shows. And so I'm going to cue up this little audio clip here. This is Klaus Schwab, who I didn't vote for. I don't believe anybody that we know voted for him because he's not elected. He's the head of the World Economic Forum. And in 1971, the World Economic Forum was founded by Klaus Schwab per the recommendation of Henry Kissinger. And in 1971, America got off the gold standard per the recommendation of Henry Kissinger to Richard Nixon. A lot of weird stuff happened in 1971, but this is Klaus Schwab. Let me hit play here.
With all the current issues on our agenda, we tend to forget that we are in the midst of the 4th industrial revolution, which accelerates global change in much more comprehensive and faster ways.
So, Robert, many people don't know the Great Reset is even happening, yet it is impacting virtually every aspect of everyone's life. Could you explain the pressures, the factors that you see attacking the U.S. dollar, just so that our listeners can understand from your perspective, what are the pressures that you see coming against the U.S. dollar right now?
Well, I think you all got to it pretty quickly. You said in 1971, Klaus Schwab popped up. But that was the same year Nixon took the dollar off the gold standard. And in 72, I was flying behind enemy lines in Vietnam looking for gold. And then I realized that the way they're going to get us in many different ways, they're going to get us through disease. And so I've had COVID, so I know it's real. I just don't know why they're censoring us about it. That's what I don't understand. And but I can't believe that then they take they censor Donald Trump, and he's a very good friend of mine. He's a good man. We've written 2 books together, and he's a very, very good man. So again, it goes back to 1971 was Klaus Schwab. 1971 was Tricky Dick Nixon taking the dollar off the gold standard. And today we have the BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. And as what happened in 2020 was when we lost Afghanistan. Exactly at the same time, Saudi Arabia pledged allegiance to China and Russia. And that's oil. And the reason I can speak about oil with some degree of authority is I went to the Merchant Marine Academy in New York. My major was oil. So I don't own oil stocks. I don't own Exxon or BP. I own the oil wells. And I own the oil in the ground. And this is the difference. So when Biden took the XL pipeline off, canceled it, the rich got richer because I was selling oil back then at $30 a barrel and immediately went to $130 a barrel. So I went to $130 a barrel, the rich got richer. I never made so much money, and most of it's tax-free. They don't tell you that because it's oil. But unfortunately, mom and pop, the middle class, got destroyed when oil went up. The poor will always be poor. I hate to say this, but unless a poor person really wants to do something, they stay poor. But what happened when Biden took the Exxon pipeline, XL pipeline offline, shut it down, as you guys in Oklahoma know, because I own a lot of oil wells in Oklahoma, the middle class was toasted. He's screwed. Again, it's what does the guy do, not what he says.
Yeah.
So when he took oil offline, meaning basically shut it down, the middle class went poor. So we have the rich getting richer, the poor remain poor, but today the middle class is getting poorer. And that's the great reset starting to come about. But again, it goes back to, as you guys talked about, in 71, Nixon took the dollar off the gold standard, but 71 was the rise of Klaus Schwab. Was that an accident? I don't think so.
Do you see a way back to the gold standard for our nation? We keep getting asked this question a lot, and there's a lot of people who have said, well, if Trump gets elected for the third time in a row and gets into office this time, then, maybe there's a way to get America back on the gold standard. And if not, what do you see as a way, if Robert Kiyosaki was elected as the president of the United States in 2024, how do we fix this system? Because we're headed towards communism, and capitalism is really the system under which America receives a lot more blessing, it feels like. So what do you see as happening there?
Well, the question, when people ask me the same question, will we go on the gold standard? I ask them, well, who doesn't want us on the gold standard? And that's what Trump was trying to drain the swamp.
Yeah.
Who doesn't want us on the gold standard? One of them is the Fed.
Right.
Number two are the banks like Wells Fargo, all those characters, Bank of America, and third, Wall Street. You see, who doesn't want us on the gold standard?
Yeah, it's some powerful people.
And so when I talk to people, I said, well, don't wait for the government to take care of you because they're already screwing us. Do you know what I mean? So if the government's always screwing us, why don't you go on your own gold standard?
That's good.
So that's why I tell the story of flying behind enemy lines in Vietnam to look for gold. And that's why I think I showed you this here. This is my first New York Stock Exchange. This little piece of gold here is 671 ounces per ton. It is the richest gold mine in America. It's 140 years old. It's called the Trixie Mine. I'm not trying to promote it because you got to do your own due diligence on it. It's ODV, call sign. But I'm on my own gold standard. I don't want the government to dictate that for me because they don't want me on the gold.
Let's talk about your gold mine for a second and just gold in general. Okay. And I'm not making this a shameless pitch for your company because I frankly haven't researched it enough to be able to speak positively or not positively about it. All I can say is that I've looked into your career and I've benefited greatly from what you've taught me. But years ago, Robert, I met with a gentleman who owned a bank. He owns a bank. And I sat down with him and I said, I'm doing well. I'm 25, 26 years old. I'm making good money now with my entertainment company. What should I do with my money? And this is the owner of a bank. He said, step one, do not put your money in a bank. And I'm going, what? You own a bank. He said, I only own a bank because it allows me to borrow money borrow money from the Federal Reserve. And he said, Clay, the Federal Reserve is not federal. There is no reserve. So I can borrow money from the Federal Reserve that they don't have, and I can lend it to people like you at a profit. But he said, you need to take a quarter of your cash and buy gold and silver, a quarter of your cash and buy land or property from emotional people that need to sell it. He says, look for people getting a divorce. When you see the clothes burning in the lawn and someone's yelling at their husband, get out of here. That's when you make an offer. He said, so buy real estate from emotional people with a quarter of your cash, buy gold and silver, and then take your other half, keep it cash on hand for your next business plan. And I thought, oh, wow. So I read The Creature from Jekyll Island. I started researching the Federal Reserve, and I started going, oh, wow. So I have just been buying gold and silver consistently since that time. And I've seen the value of what I've purchased has tripled. And I've been buying real estate from emotional people who need to sell it. What would you tell people out there? What should people be doing with, let's say they have $500,000 of cash in the bank account? What sort of things or what mindset should people have with managing their cash?
Well, first of all, I don't give financial advice because I'm not registered to do that, and you should listen anyway. But I just tell you what I do. I don't trust anything that can be printed. So if you can print it, I don't want it. So that's why I say I own oil in the ground. I don't own Exxon or BP or Shell. I own cattle because you can't print cattle. I own real estate, which I use debt for, because that's what happened in 71. The dollar came off the gold standard and dollar became debt. But I gave a guy like Dave Ramsey, who says live debt free. That's good advice for 95% of the people.
Right.
But if you want to use debt, you've got to study. And most people, as you know, are too lazy. They're not going to study. So that's why, I created my cash flow board game and all this stuff. Excuse me, you got to have a financial statement. My bankers never asked me for my report card. My bankers asked me for my financial statements.
Right.
And the average person has no idea what a financial statement is because they went to school, they're PhDs like my poor dad. The school teachers are coming out of Columbia University, which Dennis Prager says is one of the worst schools in America. But meanwhile, I just kind of stay off the beaten path and I invest in what the Fed and the government cannot print. It's that simple. So I like Wagyu cattle, not because I'm a cattle guy, but I sell the semen. And, that's sperm flow, cash flow. If the Fed could print semen, I'd be out of that business. So I only invest what they cannot print. And that's my personal strategy. Everybody should find their own strategy. I also use debt. So let's say I have an apartment house and I buy it for, let's say, 20 million. I fix it, it goes to 40 million. Most people would flip it, I got 20 and went to 40 million. Well, if you flip it, you have a tax. It's called capital gains. So what I do is I borrow out the equity. So it's like a refi. So I get a $40 million property, went from 20 to 40. And let's say I borrow 10 million out. All that debt is tax-free.
Right. And
the property pays for the debt, not me. And then I reinvest in other properties. I buy more breeding bulls. I always wanted to be a Japanese breeding bull, but I never made it. So anyway, I own the bull and I sell the semen and I get a percentage off the calf.
Wow. Now, Robert, I'm going to pull up the final thing I wanted to do here. And this is, you have a lot of people in our culture today that are passive aggressive. And then there's people like myself who are just aggressive. We have these things called the Reawaken America Tour, where your friend Kash Patel, General Flynn, Eric Trump, Mike Lindell, many great entrepreneurs are at these events. And I'm open invitation to you. We're doing these all across the country. And what we're doing is we're sharing with people the truth about what's happening. And you have my promise, I will not kick you off the stage. And I will not ever kick you off of the event like off the lineup like Freedom Fest did to you. So if you want to join Kash, I'm telling you, we're going to Pennsylvania here. Every one of the event has what, Aaron, 4,000 to 5,000 people. They're all sold out.
Yeah, up to 10,000.
And we stream to millions of people. Each one, the biggest stream we've ever had was 7.1 million people streamed the Tulsa event. And the average one has about 2 million people streaming, 102 streaming partners. So open invitation. If you want to join us, we'd love to have you. You can think about it, but I just want to tell you, you're open. You're invited to come to any of our events. No censorship, no editing, no teleprompters. And I know Cash is joining us in Pennsylvania. So it's my open, aggressive invitation. You are invited to come join us on the Reawaken America tour, should you feel the need, sir.
Well, if Cash is there, I mean, I only met him for about a couple of days. The man's a stud. I mean, I was going.
And Cash told me, and we talked. I just talked to Cash today. I just talked to Cash, and I told him what I'm plotting, what I'm planning. I'm telling him, and I really do believe. So I prayed about it. I've thought about it. I've talked to Aaron about it behind the scenes. And again, each one of these events, your people will be there. We'll buy everything you could possibly sell us and more. And we would love to have you. So again, open invitation. I can talk to your team if you want to join us. But we're going to Pennsylvania in October. It's almost sold out. We'd love to have you, sir.
I'd be honored. You know, as the Marines would say, Semper Fi.
Semper Fi.
Okay, well, I'll reach out to your team to see if we can make it happen. And again, thank you.
Her name is Sarah. She runs my life. And because I'm getting worse than Biden. You know, I have no memory anymore. But so I sometimes double book things, and she kind of keeps me straight.
Yeah.
We all need one of those.
Well, sir, I'm going to give you the floor here. Final 60 seconds. People take notes. I know they're going to go to richdad.com right now. I know they're going to be purchasing a copy of Capitalist Manifesto. I know our listeners, our readers and note takers are going to buy Capitalist Manifesto. I know they're going.
If somebody out there still doesn't own Rich Dad, Poor Dad, what are you doing? Go buy the book.
Come on.
We just told you how much it changed our lives.
Sir, we'll give you the final word. What would you say to all the listeners out there?
Well, the most important asset you have lies between your left ear and your right ear. You know, it's your brain or your mind, whatever you want to call it. But you've got to be very careful who puts information in there. You know, is the person going to, you know, if it's like my poor dad, I wouldn't listen to him. And if the person is an entrepreneur and all this, because I want to be an entrepreneur, I'll listen to him. The same as when I was getting ready to go to Vietnam, you know, my teachers were real Marine pilots. You know, they actually came back from combat. And so I was preparing in Camp Pendleton to go to Vietnam. And I chose the instructor very carefully. I wanted to know who the best instructor was, the best Marine gunship pilot. And that guy, I said, just trained the heck out of me. So the most important thing is choose your teachers wisely.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Very much choose your teachers wisely. There is nothing more important than this, what's between this ear and that ear. And be careful who your friends are. You know, there's people out there who are Judases, who will screw you. And
we know
that happens a lot, unfortunately.
Robert, this was better than I possibly could have expected, sir. And I'll tell you, the only thing that was unexpected for me, I knew it would be good, is your glasses are much more incredible than I thought they would be. You've got some great glasses there, sir.
I have at my age, I got to do anything.
All right. Hey, thank you, brother. We'll be talking to you soon. Okay.
Thank you. I'll be honored. I'm honored to be on your program. So thanks, Cash. Thanks to the Cash also.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye. On today's show, Rabbi Daniel Lapin explains why people that practice the Jewish faith are so disproportionately financially successful while sharing the secrets of financial success.
As you know, the book was spurred by a question I was constantly being asked by good people. People who didn't have a molecule of bigotry in their entire bodies. But people said to me, why is it that Jews are so disproportionately good with money?
On today's show, Rabbi Daniel Lapin explains why, in the original Hebrew language, the words work and worship meant the same thing.
This might be the most important and powerful point we're talking about today, which is that the word for worshiping the Lord is exactly the same as the word for doing your work for 6 days a week.
He explains both the power and the principle of the sixth-day work week. He explains why the original Hebrew language intentionally did not include a word for the English term fair. He explains why the original Hebrew language intentionally decided not to have a word for retirement.
We think of retirement in Hebrew as obscene.
He explains why money should be viewed as a certificate of appreciation. He explains why that in order to get rich, you must sell the customer something that they want, not something that you want. He explains why being a good person will not necessarily guarantee you financial success. He explains practical steps to increase your personal earnings and why nobody can become successful when involved in selling something that they believe to be morally reprehensible. And he explains why doing what you love will not guarantee you massive amounts of wealth and much, much more.
Money only works because of faith. And this is one of the reasons that the planet has never produced an atheistic regime with a healthy economy. Never happened.
Ladies and gentlemen, this show could be the most profound episode of the Thrivetime show that we've ever recorded. Grab a pen and a pad and get ready to enter into the lab and the dojo of mojo about how to create wealth with Dale Rabbi Lapin.
Some shows don't need a celebrity narrator to introduce the show, but this show does. 2 men, 8 kids, co-created by 2 different women, 13 multi-million-dollar businesses. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Thrivetime Show.
Now, 3, 2, 1, here we go!
Started from the bottom, now we here. Started from the bottom, and we'll show you how to get here. Started from the bottom, now we 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 here.
Yes, 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 and yes. Thrive Nation, on today's show, we are interviewing the best-selling author, the best-selling financial expert and author, Rabbi Dale Lapin. And if you've ever been out there seeking financial wisdom, financial advice based upon biblical truth, this show is the show for you. Rabbi Lapin, welcome onto the show, and how are you, sir?
I couldn't be any better, thank you, Clay. Delighted to be together with you and to share some time with your wonderful audience.
Well, I would like to start by asking you what the term rabbi means.
It merely means a teacher with a specialty in ancient Jewish wisdom's insights into the Bible.
Now, I know that you have had a ton of success as an author, and you've really developed a career that spans decades, but could you share with us where you grew up and what life was like growing up?
Certainly. I was a terrible child, and I grew up in the home of a very famous and distinguished rabbi and his wife. This was in Johannesburg, South Africa. And when I was about 10 years old, the parents were rightfully worried that I was turning into a completely barefoot savage.
Wow.
And so they sent me to boarding school in England. And I went to school there and gradually became civilized, but it took quite a while.
What is it like going to a school like that?
It was shocking. It was shocking to me because it was a school way beyond the standards I was accustomed to. So it took a little while for me to find my feet and to become accepted. I had to work at it, and it taught me a great deal. It really did. But, I was 10 years old. What did I know?
Rabbi Dale, when did you decide that you wanted to become a rabbi?
Never.
Never.
My father was a rabbi, my grandfather, my great-grandfather, and so I grew up knowing beyond any shadow of a doubt that of all the careers in the whole world, the one thing I really would never, ever be was a rabbi. But I've come to the conclusion that the good Lord has your destiny in mind, and he'll send you 1 or 2 soft messages. And if you don't pay any attention, he begins to get you with a 2x4. And eventually he whacks you hard enough that you do start paying attention. So I actually became an engineer.
Really?
I worked for Royal Dutch Philips, the Philips, not Royal Dutch, the Philips Electronics Company, designing communication equipment, and I thought that was what I wanted to do. I certainly did not want to replicate the career path of my family, but as I said, the good Lord has plans, and you can ignore them for a certain amount of time, but eventually you say, this hurts too much. Maybe I better just do what I'm expected to do.
Your book, Thou Shalt Prosper, is just filled with so many nuggets of knowledge that they really don't teach in college. So many profound ideas that are
Well, on the
life-changing.
contrary, they teach the opposite very often in college.
They do.
As you know, the book was spurred by a question I was constantly being asked by good people, people who didn't have a molecule of bigotry in their entire bodies. But people said to me, why is it that Jews are so disproportionately good with money?
Right.
And I realized that this was a question worth answering. And I even thought to myself, I'm going to be absolutely honest about it. I'm going to spend as long as it takes to research this. And if it turns out that Jews are good with money because they routinely rip everyone else off, well, then I'm going to know the truth. But it turned out not to be the case. There are bad apples in every bunch, and no more or less with Jews. Was it that it's Jewish genes, that the Cossacks killed all the poor Jews, leaving the rich ones available to reproduce? But if that were true, it would need to show a money gene in Jewish sperm, which just doesn't exist. And we also see that in common with other groups, they're very often in Jewish families. After several generations, wealth is dissipated, not created. So I had to really probe, and finally and eventually, after it was a good few years, nearly 7 years, it became apparent to me that the inevitable conclusion, which shocked me, I hadn't expected that, was that embedded in the Bible, embedded in the Torah, structured within the intricacies of the Hebrew language and 2,000 years of carefully communicated ancient Jewish wisdom, with thousands of tips and tools and techniques and specific strategies for how money works and how to be good with it. And I decided to condense that into a book called Thou Shalt Prosper, the 10 Commandments for Making Money. And the publishers said it was much too big. They needed to, it was a good few years, nearly 7 years, it became apparent to me that the inevitable conclusion, which shocked me, I hadn't expected that, was that embedded in the Bible, embedded in the Torah, structured within the intricacies of the Hebrew language and 2,000 years of carefully communicated ancient Jewish wisdom, with thousands of tips and tools and techniques and specific strategies for how money works and how to be good with it. To begin with, this book and our work was about how do you increase your revenue? How do you make more money than you are now making? And that was what the work was all about.
How did you go from your early career to becoming a rabbi and a financial teacher from a biblical perspective? How did you make that jump? What was the transition like?
Well, I was forced. In spite of the fact that I thought I wanted to become an engineer, and I was forced, before I could even go to school for engineering, I first of all had to go to Bible school, and I had to become ordained as a rabbi. And my father said, look, I don't care if you don't practice as a rabbi, but I want you to be able to. And I didn't understand it at the time, but obviously today I'm enormously grateful that he insisted.
Now, Tim Redmond has been a client of mine for years, and now we work together on different business ventures, and he was actually my boss. When I was 19 years old, I landed an internship at tax and accounting software, and he was my boss. And I'm telling you, this guy quotes you all the time. It's almost like he's a paid advocate of you? Like he's a paid, like a sales guy.
No, it's not that at all. It's
He loves
that,
you.
Tim really gets it. Tim has studied this material. He and I have worked together on numerous occasions, and we've spent hours and hours and hours studying this material and researching and working on it together. So he really gets it, and that's really all it is.
Well, Tim, this is the thing. Tim pulls me aside. I don't remember what year it was, but he pulls me aside and he says, hey, the Hebrew language was God's original language. And that original language, the Hebrew language, does not have a word for retirement. And I'm going, what? And maybe I'm losing something in translation there. Could you explain the Hebrew language, and does it have a phrase for retirement? What's that all about?
Sure. Well, needless to say, I'm not the only person. And, this is not Rabbi Daniel Lapin jumping up and saying, hey, Hebrew's God's language. No, it's not like that at all. Many learned people, people who developed the Oxford English Dictionary understood it. Sir William Bradford, who came to North America on the Mayflower, wrote a book in the 17th century called History of the Plymouth Plantation. And the first 20 pages or so in his own handwriting, in the manuscript of the book, are in Hebrew. And in those 20 pages, he even explains why he studied Hebrew and learned how to read the Bible in the original Hebrew, the Old Testament. And he says it's because this is the language in which God spoke to the patriarchs of old, and it's the language in which Adam named all living things, etc., etc. This Lord's language does have certain pieces of wisdom in it. One of them is that certain words, concepts that for which no word exists in biblical Hebrew, are false concepts. So, for instance, there's no word for adolescent. Now, I don't know if you've raised teenagers and adolescents, but if you have, you know that the word teenager or adolescent is a euphemism for somebody who wants all the advantages of being an adult with all the slack cut to him for being a child. Doesn't work like that in the real world. You got to make up your mind. And that's how I raise my children. I'm not interested in your chronological age. I'm interested in your behavior. You can either behave in a way that says you're an adult, or you can behave in a way that says you're a child. Those are the only two choices, and we will treat you accordingly. There's no word in Hebrew for hero. Why is that? Well, what is the most common usage of the word hero? Oh, he's my hero, or who is your hero? That's what you hear all the time.
Right.
The word doesn't exist. It's a false concept because God doesn't want me to be anybody else but me. He doesn't want me to strive to be like my hero, whoever that is. He wants me to strive to be what he has decided is my destiny. And it's terribly important, particularly in our financial success, in the development of our business personality, that we don't try and replicate somebody we admire, but that we use the information and we use the inspiration in order to develop and grow and ultimately achieve our own destiny. And so retirement is another word that doesn't exist. Why is that? Well, it all flows from a really important principle early in the book, Thou Shalt Prosper. And this is fundamental to the disproportionate financial success enjoyed by the people of Israel. And that is that, look, nobody can ever succeed. No decent person can ever succeed at any activity that deep in their hearts they believe to be morally reprehensible. And so, if you're a decent person and you're working in sales, but you believe that your merchandise is shoddy and overpriced, you'll fail. You can't sell it because your heart's not in it. And so it becomes very important to understand that we become the kind of people that relate to the moral vision that we hold. And so if you believe that making money is essentially taking money, if you believe that profit is essentially plunder, then you'll never be very good at making money because you have moral qualms about it, thinking that you're taking, and by the way, many people are like this. You know, the babysitter we had working for us Saturday night 3 weeks ago, I noticed when we came home and I wanted to pay her, I said, "How much do we owe you?" And her eyes went down to the carpet and her toes started tracing patterns. She was uncomfortable to say, "You owe me $40," because she felt she was taking my money. And so I had to explain to her, I said, "Look, we want to pay you. We want to pay you what you ask for. And if it's too much, we won't use you again. If it's right, we want to be able to use you again. So please don't be shy about saying how much you want. You're not taking anything from us. You gave us an evening out." You follow what I'm saying?
Yes, because money is just a certificate of appreciation and performance.
That's exactly right. And the problem with retirement is that what you're essentially saying is, "Hey, I've got enough, so I'm getting out of here." To which I say, "Hello, you know, you've been my doctor or my dentist or my bookkeeper or my shoe polishing guy, or I don't care what it is, but for the last 20 years, you've been taking care of a need I have in my life, for which I've been happy to pay you. And now you tell me, sorry, you're not," like, well, what's with you? What are you doing instead? What, you going to play golf instead of taking care of me? Well, that suggests that all along you weren't in this to take care of me, but you were in it just to get what you could get out of it. Now that you got enough, you're done. So in that sense, we think of retirement in Hebrew as obscene.
This is a verse. I know that. Can you explain to listeners out there the difference between Christianity and Judaism, just so that the listeners out there who...
I can't, for several reasons.
Okay, sure.
Number one is I only know about Judaism.
Okay.
Number two, that's theological, and I have zero interest in theology.
Okay.
Theology is what men think about God.
Okay.
And I'm just, much of what men think about men is wrong and silly. I'm certainly not interested in what men think about God. I'm really only interested in what God thinks about man. That's not theology, that's Bible. So I'm sorry, but that's a question I simply can't answer.
Love it.
Not
love
my
it.
field.
I love the directness of it. This is, maybe I'll try it this way. I have a Bible verse that I quote often, and I quote it quite a bit. It's Colossians 3:23-24. It says, "Whatever you do, work at it with your heart, as working for the Lord, not for human masters, since you know that you will receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward. It is the Lord Christ you're serving." Do you share the same view that you're working as unto the Lord? It's like you're working to honor God. Do you view it the same way or no?
Okay, so again, I don't know the New Testament.
Got it.
But I know the Hebrew Scriptures very well.
Yes.
And a crucial aspect of this, and I think this is goes exactly to this important point you're making, and that is that in the Hebrews. Okay, let's look at this real quick.
Yeah.
In the book of Genesis, God put man in the Garden of Eden to work it. Right.
Right.
And we also know that in chapter 20 of Exodus, we got the Ten Commandments, and in the Ten Commandments, in commandment number 4, it says, 6 days shall you do all your work. So here we got two verses having to do with work. God put Adam in the Garden of Eden to work it, and 6 days you must do all your work. Now, there are another two verses I want to share with you quickly. One is that God says to Moses, "Go to Pharaoh and say, 'Let my people go so that they may worship me in the desert.'" And the other one is towards the end of the book of Joshua. Joshua says, "You know what? I don't care what you guys want to do. As for me and my family, we will worship the Lord." Now, in the last 40 seconds, I've shared with you 4 verses. 2 of the verses include the word work, and the other 2 verses include the word worship. What you don't know, none of our listeners know, is that in the Hebrew text, there's only one word for all those 4 instances, which is an incredibly powerful thing. This might be the most important and powerful point we're talking about today, which is that the word for worshiping the Lord is exactly the same as the word for doing your work for 6 days a week. In other words, to put it very directly, taking care of business is another way of worshiping God. One of the ways, by the way, that in English we say customer service and worship service, recognizing this fundamental reality that in taking care of our customers, we're also serving God.
I am probably going to have to put that on repeat 40 to 50 times in a row because it's so mind expanding. And
I read this book called Think and Grow Rich years ago by Napoleon Hill.
Oh, sure, Napoleon Hill, yeah.
And I'm reading that book because my boss told me I had to read it or I'm fired. He said I was like a ship without a rudder. He says,
Yeah,
you're a ship without a rudder. You got to read the book. And Napoleon Hill said if you over-deliver, eventually you'll be overpaid. And he goes, just
Yes, that's right.
exceed the expectations of every person on every transaction. And that really helped me because I grew up without any money. And there's just so many powerful concepts in your book. And I want to ask you about this one. The concept of businessman, being a business person. How do you, in your book, Thou Shalt Prosper, you talk about this a little bit, but the Hebrew concept of businessman, I believe, and again, I'm just making sure I'm getting my notes right because I've got notes everywhere, is a man of faith, is a businessman. Can you kind of explain that? And where am I getting that wrong?
Sure. No, you got that exactly right. That in Hebrew, the word for a business professional is also a person of faith. And that is the reason why history's most effective engine of wealth creation, namely the United States of America, puts not on the walls of its churches where you would have expected the phrase, but on its currency, the phrase, "In God we trust." And that's because if you're in church, you kind of probably already know that, so you don't need it on the wall of churches. But what you need to know is that money only works because of faith. And this is one of the reasons that the planet has never produced an atheistic regime with a healthy economy. Never happened. And the most religious, the most Bible-centric country on earth, which is the United States of America, is also the engine of greatest prosperity. I'll go further than that and point out that in the 1,000 years, from the year 900 to the year 1900, no indigenous capital market ever grew in a non-Christian country. So today we have stock markets in Accra, and we have stock markets in Hong Kong and Singapore, and we've got stock markets all over the place. But originally, the stock market grew in London and Amsterdam. Essentially, the idea of pooling capital, which is the heart of faith, only grew in Christian Bible-based countries. And I mean, one only has to look at the most prominent and revered structures in every European city, like Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, and you'll find the Christian origins of the wealth building of Western civilization.
And Rabbi Daniel, I just want to, and I'm not going to get into a religious debate with you at all. I just want to make sure the listeners out there, because there's somebody out there who, doesn't understand. You did with Judaism, you really have a deep knowledge of the Old Testament. Is that correct for anybody out there who's unclear in their mind of?
Yes, it is. And it's also important for everyone to understand. I'm not saying you have to be Jewish to succeed with this book. I'm not saying you have to be of the Jewish faith in any way whatsoever in order to benefit from the strategies of ancient Jewish wisdom that I share in Thou Shalt Prosper.
That is right. And I don't want anybody out there to discount that, because I just want to make sure we kind of understand where you're coming from and your background there. Now, you rewrite in your book, this is highlighted and circled, and I have to apologize for the desecration of this book. But in your book, you wrote...
On the contrary, I'm thrilled to hear it.
You wrote, take out a dollar bill and look at it. Now pat yourself on your back because you're looking at a certificate of performance. Rabbi, can you break that down?
Sure. Look, let me give you an example. And by the way, this is really important, this point you're bringing up, because if we don't understand money, we cannot get it. I'm probably one of the worst fishermen in the world, but I like fishing for salmon in the cold waters of British Columbia off the west coast of Canada. And something I learned a long time ago is that the best money I'm going to spend is not on my gear, but it's on the guide. Because somebody who really knows the fish will help me catch them. I can have the most expensive rod and reel, but if I don't know fish, if I don't know salmon specifically, I'm not going to catch them. And I really didn't until I twigged onto this fact that, hey, I can hire a guide. And all of a sudden, I looked like a good fisherman.
Right.
In the same way, money's like that as well. If you don't get it, if you don't understand it, it's simply not going to work. And so, for instance, in the book, we cover the whole question of physical and spiritual. What's the difference? And by the way, spiritual doesn't mean godly or holy or religious. Spiritual just means something you cannot measure in a laboratory. And I explain why you've got to be able to understand the essential spirituality of money. And part of that is that, look, imagine, let's say my job is a roofer, and I was planning on taking my kids, fishing or whatever, and all of a sudden I get a call from somebody who says, "Hey, you're the roofer?" I say, "Yep." He says, "Can you come quickly? It's been raining where we are, and there's a leak in the roof. My wife is going nuts. The water's coming into the kitchen, making everybody miserable." And so I'm just about to say to him, "Hey, pal, you know what? How about I come tomorrow? Because like this afternoon, I'm planning on taking my kids fishing." And all of a sudden, fortunately, I shut up because I remember to think before I speak. And I, in fact, say to him, "I'll be happy to come. The only thing is I was about to take my kids fishing, but it would be worth much, much more for them to see how I serve another one of God's children by fixing your roof. And so if you don't mind, I'll be on my way, but I'll bring them along as well." So pile the kids into the pickup truck, tools in the back, off we go. And the kids help me, and we fix it up. We put down some new shingles. The roof is fixed. The guy's as happy as could be. His wife is smiling, and he says, "I appreciate it very much. Would you need some certificates of performance?" I say, "Yeah, please, I would. I need 100 certificates of performance." So he takes out a roll of green certificates, and he peels off 100 of them and gives them to me. And I say, "Thank you very much indeed." That night, I take my wife for dinner, and we come into the restaurant, and the restaurateur says, "Yeah." And I think, well, it's not really a polite way to welcome a diner, but all right. I say, "Could we please have 2 big fat steaks and a plate of the largest, biggest French fries you can make?" And he says, "What, you want me to go into that hot kitchen and slave over a stove to make you steak and fries?" And I said, "Well, yeah, isn't that what this restaurant's all about?" Right. And he says, "No, as a matter of fact, this restaurant is only for members of a club who take care of God's other children." I said, "I don't know what you're talking about." He says, "Well, let me put it this way. Could you prove to me that you've taken care of anybody else today?" I said, "Well, as a matter of fact, I can." He said, "How are you going to do that?" I say, "Right here in my pocket. The person I took care of this afternoon gave me 100 certificates of performance." He said, "Well, why didn't you say so before?" Brings me a great meal. At the end of the meal, I say to him, "Now, would you like any certificates of performance?" He says, "Yeah. My kids have to go to the dentist tomorrow, and our dentist only takes care of people who've taken care of other people." And he says, "So I'd need 60 certificates of performance from you." So I happily peel off 60, and I give them to him, and off we go. We are all part of the club of human beings who take care of other human beings. Beautiful.
I don't understand. I grew up very, without money. I grew up very, very limited resources. I don't understand the argument mentally, financially, spiritually, as you defined it, the argument for socialism. How can anybody with a sound mind advocate for socialism right now? How do you...
It's not an accident that almost without exception, socialists are people who do not share biblical faith. Socialism almost always goes together with atheism. Now, what's this mean? It's very simple. One of the big differences between a person who has a spiritual awareness and somebody who thinks the world is confined to only the material is that people who think the world's confined to the material think that a human being is nothing other than about $10 worth of cheap chemicals. Like a bunch of nitrogen, a bunch of oxygen, a bunch of carbon, some hydrogen, some potassium, and all of this mixed together, produces. And anyways, that biological determinism is an atheistic and physical view of the human being. A person like that says a human being is just a body. I don't think that's right. In fact, I'm willing to state with some certainty that it's not right, not out of faith, but out of life experience and financial experience. I think people are both body and soul. Now, one of the big differences between physical and spiritual, and I can wrap this up and bring it in for a landing very easily, is that an example of a difference is a saxophone is physical. because you can take it into a lab and weigh it. You can measure it. You know, a saxophone's made out of 5 pounds of brass and, you know, and carefully arranged and structured. That's what a saxophone is. And if I have it on the table in front of me, and when my attention is diverted, you run in and take it away. Now you've got the saxophone and I'm without a saxophone. That's how physical things work, because it's a rule of physics that any physical object can only be in one place at one time. This is an expansion of Einsteinian principles of time-space. Any physical object can only be in one place at one time. However, a tune is not a physical thing. It's a spiritual thing. There's no instrument in the world, no lab in the world capable of measuring a tune to see whether it's the kind of tune that would make people happy or sad or make men march off to war or whatever it is. And so a tune, if I have a tune and you hear me whistling my tune and you learn it and you walk away and you teach it to a bunch of other people, have you taken away anything from me? No, you've just made the world a more tuneful place. The difference between physical and spiritual is physical can only be in one place at a time. Spiritual can be in more than one place at a time. Now, if money is only physical, and sure, socialistic people view the world in materialistic terms. You've heard of the Marxist materialistic dialectic, and that is that everything is only physical. That's the essence of Marxism and communism and socialism. Well, in that case, money is like the saxophone. And if I have some, and this is really important, if I've got it, that must mean there are a whole bunch of other people who don't have it, because I must have taken it from them.
That, you know,
and the only
so
way
powerful.
for other people to get it is to take it from me. That's called, by the way, redistribution. But the way money truly works is it's spiritual, not physical. And that is that two human beings can agree on a transaction, and that transaction doesn't exchange money. It brings money into being. And I explain all the arithmetic and mathematics of that in the book, Thou Shalt Prosper. But the bottom line is that inflation is when the government prints more money than transactions have created. And deflation is when government doesn't print enough currency to account for the fact that every time you and I did a transaction, we actually brought money into being.
Wow. And Andrew, I think I'm going to have to duct tape my head together and listen to this show at least 5 times. Rabbi Daniel, you talk about, you write about that in order for people to prosper, we have to behave decently and honorably toward one another and live among others who conduct themselves in a similar fashion. Can you explain what this is all about?
Yeah. Look, a lot of people have said to me, well, I don't get it, my rabbi or my pastor is this really holy guy. He's so spiritual, he's so wonderful, and yet he suffers in terrible poverty. So, okay, fine. Yeah, I would never say a word against your rabbi or against your pastor. I'm sure they're very beautiful people. Let me give you an example. How about a guy who is a beautiful human being, lovely person, loving, kind, compassionate, spiritual, godly, virtuous in every possible way, wouldn't hurt a fly. And he climbs to the top of a 20-story building, and he steps out the window. Well, he starts moving towards the ground really, really quickly. And it's kind of a thrilling ride for about 4 seconds, but it comes to a very abrupt end in a way that kills him. And then he comes before the good Lord, and he says to him, I don't get this, Lord. I'm such a good person. I'm so kind to people. I pray to you twice a day. I give charity. I tithe my money. How could you let me die? And God says to him, well, I gave you a set of principles, both physical and spiritual. And one of the sets of physical principles that I put there in the world for you to learn is that if you step out of the window on a 20th floor, you're going to come to a very painful end. Why didn't you pay attention to that? Did you really think that the fact that you are good and virtuous can take the place of actual knowledge? And so I say exactly the same thing to the poor rabbi or the poor pastor. I say, of course you're a good and kind person. That's lovely. But did you really think that that's enough to make money? No. God wants you to have certain information, which, by the way, is why the Old Testament is filled with financial data. I don't know the New Testament, like I said, but I wouldn't be if somebody told me there's 1,000 times more mention of money in a positive sense in the Old Testament than the New Testament. I wouldn't be the least bit surprised, because many, many, many dear, good Christian friends of mine, before they started studying Bible with me and learning the Old Testament, they believed that money is evil. And when you believe money is evil, I promise you're not going to get any.
Right. Yeah.
And so the Old Testament teaches these principles about not stepping out of the 20th floor window. In other words, it's not enough to be a good person. That doesn't stave off poverty. God wants us to do actual specific things. And what those are some of the things we're talking about.
You talk about, you write about the idea that in order to be a successful person, you can't promise more than you're going to deliver. You have to actually promise less than you're going to deliver. Can you
You've got to over deliver always, yes.
Now, you talked about how businesses that don't do something valuable for others do not survive and should not survive. Profit is a way to measure how useful a business is. This doesn't ever change. I'd love to have you share more about that.
Sure. So there is somebody in New Zealand that I'm coaching at the moment, business coaching. And here's how our engagement began. This person told me the business he started and what he is supplying to customers in New Zealand and how he's advertising and marketing, and it's just not working. And I said to him, what made you decide to sell this particular thing at the particular price you're selling it at? And he said, I just believe deep in my heart that it's what people need and that I'm providing a real value. And so I said to him, look, part of ancient Jewish wisdom is that I am sometimes going to help you collide with reality. And like any other collision, a collision with reality can be very painful. And I'm going to tell you that we don't really care about what you believe. That's not the point. The point is that only the market can determine value. And so you think that the market needs this thing, and that's because you are in love with this particular type of product. That means you should be buying that product, not selling it. But we need to build you up so as you fall in love with the act of business, which is the act of supplying the needs and desires of other human beings. And if that was really what motivated you, you would have done research to find out what people really want in your neighborhood in New Zealand, not decide in advance what you want to sell them. And so that is very much at the core of what we're talking about. Understanding that it is the market out there, that it's what people want. The idea of being in business is serving God's other children. And you can only do that by finding out the things that they want and they need and they desire and then providing them, which is why one of the stupidest things that anybody ever tells new graduates is, oh, now that you've finished your studies, you're leaving school, you must find a job doing what you love doing. Well, that's rubbish. That's an unbelievably selfish piece of advice which will never work. Take me, for instance. I love boating. I'm yet to find anybody who's willing to pay me a nice living for going boating.
Right.
It's irrelevant. What I got to do is find out what people around me need me to do, and then I got to learn to love it.
You are just a man who is filled with so much wisdom, and I just think everybody should go out there and pick up Thou Shalt Prosper. There's just so many great concepts in there, and I wanted to seek your wisdom on two more questions there, Rabbi Daniel.
Yes, of course.
What are the most costly and harmful habits that you see stopping most people from having success or growth or profitability with their business or their lives?
Well, it's not necessarily the same thing for there are things that people can do that harm their marriages and their businesses. And I'm so interested that the way you phrased the question included both those areas in terms of family. And let me give you an example. One of the most fundamental principles of a sexual relationship is that it has to be between two people. It can't be one person.
Okay.
And if it is, most people are embarrassed about it and they don't talk about it. You know, people might say, you can pick me up at 8, I've got to take a shower first. But they'll never say, pick me up at 8 because I first have to shower and, you'll pardon me, provide myself with sexual satisfaction. Nobody would ever say that because there's an embarrassment because you're not providing anybody else with anything. And we human beings were created by God to be givers, not takers. And so that's one of the reasons that that particular solitary activity is shameful. As much as, I mean, Bill Clinton had a Surgeon General who he had to fire because she was obsessed with trying to normalize and popularize that particular solitary behavior.
True.
People weren't interested in it because deep down in our souls, we all know that sex is a gift for bringing together two people. It's bringing joy to another person. And that's particularly important, particularly to a man. It's not a case of seeking self-satisfaction. It's providing somebody else. Now, if you fail to grasp that, you're just not going to be very good at marriage. Exactly the same thing is true for business. And that is, you have to be obsessively preoccupied with fulfilling the needs of another person. That couldn't be more fundamental and basic. It's not about you, it's about the other person. And so in both those areas, both family and marriage, both family and business, the idea is learning to find the thrill in bringing pleasure, satisfaction, joy, and enthusiasm to another human being. So that's absolutely fundamental, and it's very, very interesting that you know, you can buy books on how to build a boat. You can buy books on how to build an airplane in your basement. You can buy books on how to build a log cabin. And in all of those cases, those things you build are going to work just fine. They really are. You know, Boeing builds planes, and other than a few sad exceptions, they don't fly 98% of the time. They fly 100% of the time. Right. When people build ships, with the sad exception of the Titanic, ships float 100% of the time. When an architect builds a building, it stands. It's not like 84% of this guy's buildings stand. They all stand.
Right.
But when people set out to build a marriage, the success rate is only about 70%. When people set out to build a business, the success rate's even lower than that. So why is it that it's so easy to build a building or a ship or an airplane? It's so reliable, and yet it's so risky to build a marriage or to build a business. And the answer is because it's very easy to communicate physical data. And to build boats and skyscrapers and airplanes, all you need is physical data. It's not hard. But marriage and business both involve spiritual data. And without that spiritual data, your chances are very low.
Rabbi Daniel, you know, and I don't want you to take this as an offensive question. You are not Bill Gates. You know, you're not Oprah. You're not Steve Jobs. You're not. So for somebody out there who's wrestling with this idea of what makes him qualified to give me financial advice?
That's a terrific question, and I not only don't take offense, but I admire you for being direct enough to ask the question. Look, the answer is really very, very simple, and if I may say, without sounding obnoxious, it's a very important point, and that is, look, Bill Gates would be probably a more entertaining interview. And people who heard you interviewing Bill Gates would probably talk about it for the next 3 weeks. Oh, wow, I heard Bill Gates interview. Because he's a celebrity and he's one of the wealthiest guys in the world. And this is remarkable. However, with all humility, I'm more useful than Bill Gates. Bill Gates is very, very helpful in terms of making money as long as your father is a very prominent and well-connected national attorney. And as long as your mother is on the board of directors of IBM, and as long as you dropped out of a prestigious university at the cusp of the computer revolution, if all of those things apply to you, Bill Gates is more useful to you than I am.
Got it.
But if you dropped Bill Gates into Wichita, Kansas with $100 in his pocket, and you dropped any student of mine into Wichita, Kansas with $100 in his pocket, I am almost 100% willing to guarantee that at the end of the first month, my student will have a whole lot more success than Bill Gates will. And I'm willing to guarantee that at the end of a year, Bill Gates will be knocking on doors asking for help, and my student will be well on the road to a fortune. That's the difference. And the same thing applies to Bezos or Donald Trump. They are all very specific people. Bezos, by the way, might be a slight exception because he did start a business from absolutely nothing. So he may well be a bit different. But what I bring is history's most effective longitudinal study of hundreds of thousands of ordinary men and women, Jewish men and women, of all colors and all sizes and all shapes and all backgrounds, all of whom succeeded financially beyond your wildest dreams. There are people who started huge businesses in America, like CVS Pharmacy and Commodore Computers and Chappelle Construction, that was started by people who came out of World War II with their families destroyed, with their backgrounds destroyed, with their wealth destroyed. They came as broken, penniless people. And they became giants of commerce. They became multimillionaires. Using what? Using the principles of ancient Jewish wisdom.
Rabbi Daniel, thank you so much for investing the time in our listeners. I personally will be listening to this show multiple times. One, because I go through and edit every show, so I will definitely listen to it once. But there's certain shows where I'll listen to the show 2 times or 3 times, and then your book, it's so practical, but yet it provides so much context, so much richness of wisdom. If you had to recommend one of your books to the listeners out there, is there a certain book you'd recommend? And then I'll let you get back to doing what you do.
I would recommend either start with Thou Shalt Prosper,
okay,
and then move on to Business Secrets from the Bible, or you can start with Business Secrets from the Bible and move on to Thou Shalt Prosper.
Well, we're going to put a link to the show notes right now, and let's get you have Thou Shalt Prosper, which I've read, and the other book title there, Rabbi, was what?
Business Secrets from the Bible.
Business Secrets from the Bible. We're going to buy one right now on Amazon. That way we're starting the momentum here. Thank you for investing in our listeners, and I just hope you have an awesome day.
Thank you very much indeed. It's been an honor to be with you, and I wish success and prosperity to everybody listening in.
In 1938, the Fair Labor Standards Act was passed, created, and put into law. However, think about this for a second. If the Pilgrims who came over to the United States of America they landed at Plymouth Rock, imagine that they believed in the 40-hour work week. Would they have survived? No. Okay, let's look at the 40-hour work week from a secular perspective. Elon Musk, who is the guy behind PayPal, the man behind Tesla, the guy behind SpaceX, he once wrote, and I'm quoting, Elon Musk once wrote, he said, "Work like hell. I mean, you just have to put in 80 to 100 hours per week. This improves the odds of success. If other people are putting in 40-hour work weeks and you're putting in 100-hour work weeks, then if you're doing the same thing, you know that you will achieve in 4 months what it takes them to achieve in a year." My friend, the point is the 40-hour work week will enslave you to poverty. I can't think of examples. I've read autobiographies about Conrad Hilton. I read the biographies of Russell Simmons, Dale Carnegie, Phil Knight, Larry Bird, the basketball player,
the founder of Starbucks. I can go on and on and on. The In-N-Out story, the Quick Trip story, the Southwest story. None of those people worked 40 hours a week. If you want to be poor, work 40 hours a week. But if you want to succeed, you have to believe in and act upon the 6th day principle. You just have to work 6 days. You cannot get ahead if you're working 40 hours a week. It's not possible. If you're out there and you're a Christian and you want a Bible verse you can print out and put on your mirror and put on Facebook and wherever you're going to see it, Exodus 16:5 reads, "On the 6th day they are to prepare what they bring in, and that is to be twice as much as they gather on the other days." Or read the book of Genesis. God created the earth in how many days? 6 days, and he rested on the 7th. So if you're out there today and you are of the Judeo-Christian faith, stop working 40 hours a week. Go to work for free on your off day. Whatever you have to do, just work 6 days a week, because when you sow the seeds 6 days per week, you're going to gather a harvest twice as much on the 6th day. But you cannot get ahead working 40 hours per week. And if you're out there and you say, I don't believe in the Bible, then just fire up the Elon Musk quote or read about the life in history and the times of John D. Rockefeller or Andrew Carnegie or Russell Simmons or Michael Jordan or anybody. None of these people worked 40 hours a week. This idea that you're going to achieve success while working 40 hours a week is absolutely a shamockery. It is wrong. It is backwards. It's not possible. And this podcast, I hope that it has touched your soul in a profound way, because the idea that the word work and worship mean the same thing, wow. The idea that the Hebrew language doesn't have a word for the word fair, wow. The idea that the Hebrew language doesn't even acknowledge the word retirement because they think the word is obscene, that deserves a wow. What does it mean to be obscene? Well, obscene means to be offensive or disgusting, to be absent of morality. That's what obscene means. And in the Hebrew language, the concept of retirement is obscene. And I agree. Stop trying to work 40 hours a week so that you can eventually work 0 hours per week. My friend, you have to work 6 days a week if you want to become successful. So I would ask you this. How many hours a week are you working right now? How many days a week are you working right now? Because if you are not working 6 days a week, you cannot get ahead. And now, without any further ado, we'd like to end each and every show with a boom. And so here we go. 3, 2, 1, boom!
My name is Tyler Hastings, and this is my wife, Rachel, and our company is Delricht Research out of New Orleans. During our time working with Thrive, we've had numerous successes. When we first started, we were working with one physician. We had one research site, and we were seeing on average, between 10 and 15 patients a week. Since working with Thrive in the last 18 months, we now have 4 research sites. We work with over 5 physicians, and on average, we're now seeing over 60 patients per week.
For example, Tyler and I actually got the opportunity to come out to Tulsa, and we're fortunate enough that the Thrive team took us out to some of the businesses that they own, and we really got to see in real life, real time, some of the systems and processes, and it was just incredible. A real life example of some of the businesses and the things that they're implementing.
Having a coach is important to us. They act as not only an accountability factor, but they're someone we can talk to on a daily basis as we go through the problems of running a business that inevitably come up. They always understand what we're going through, and they're always there to help us or guide us through the problems that we experience. The best part of our experience working with Thrive has just been seeing our relationship grow. So at each step as our business grows, they have something else to provide us with. They've got the resources, whether it be marketing, graphic design, website development, or even into accounting practices. Maybe we need a new insurance policy. They have someone they can connect us with, or they have the direct resource we need to speak with for any of the problems we face. If someone's thinking about signing up for the coaching coaching program, I would highly recommend that they call in for a free 30-minute coaching session and see exactly what the team can do for you. Just speak with someone, let them know what you're going through, and I think you'll find that, regardless of what you need, there's someone there that can help you.